Hello, everybody, and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. Today's talk, I'm going to talk about tulips, gold, and AI. In other words, financial bubbles and Vedic astrology or Jyotish. So, if you're not familiar, Vedic astrology is ancient Indian astrology that's more than 5,000 years old. So, we're going to be taking a look at basically astrological history to see if it can inform current times. All right, so let's take a look. A note beforehand, the information presented here is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical, financial, professional, or life advice of any kind. If you are in need, please contact an appropriate professional for support. Okay, so especially for those of you who are new to the channel, all of my videos, teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are in my concepts playlist. I have over 100 videos in the playlist that you can learn from. Wherever you see a double asterisk in one of my talks, that means there's a teaching video on the subject if you would like to learn more. My channel is all about playlists so that videos are easy to find. So this type of video is going to be in my World Historical Moments playlist, but there are others. And if you like to learn astrology by looking at the birth charts of famous people, places, and moments in time, I would check out my Birth Chart Archive List 2026 video, where I list over 180 famous birth charts I've analyzed on the channel and the videos you can find them in. Some of the newest videos I've posted, in case you missed any, July 2026 planetary transits, where I included the birth charts of Princess Diana, the doctor who prevented thalidomide from entering the U.S. Market with a drug, and then the Hagia Sophia building in Istanbul. It was a historical landmark. It is still a historical landmark, but was important historically. Um, also, the new moon or Amavasya that happened on 14th of July 2026, and the Magha Nakshatra, the legacy star. Also, if you want to start learning Vedic astrology, I listed some videos at the end of this slide that I would start with to really get a solid foundation on that. Okay, so how did this talk even come about? Well, I recently did a video where I analyzed the birth charts of the state of California and major cities in that state. So Sacramento, San Jose, San Diego, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. And as part of that, I was learning more about the history of that time, which was very soon, excuse me, California and those major cities got incorporated very soon after the California Gold Rush started. And actually, they were sort of fast tracked because of the California Gold Rush. And so that's when I started looking at, that particular moment in time. And again, most of that California Gold Rush happened in Northern California. So in between Sacramento and San Francisco. And also at that time, San Jose was the capital of California before Sacramento eventually became the capital of California. So there's some interesting history there. And it just so happens that currently we have this major development of AI or artificial intelligence that's going on. And the heart of that is in San Jose again, so Silicon Valley. And so there's some major AI development as well as funding opportunities that are going around. And so I'm often seeing in the news these days, the financial news, that people are currently wondering and discussing if this is an AI bubble. And so if you're not familiar, financial or economic bubbles are often used interchangeably, those terms. But basically, it's a situation where something is overvalued and people are paying high prices for it, and that's not sustainable. And then the bubble, usually the bubble will break, and then there can be fallout from that. So again, that happened with the California Gold Rush, and I will go through the chart for that and the history of that. But I was just wondering if I look at other financial bubbles that are known to be, and I'm also going to look at the tulip trade in the Netherlands. That was the first recorded historical financial bubble. And if I can look at those charts, maybe there's something we can learn, and inform us about the current situation with AI. Okay. So, and again, there are some concerns, even beyond the astrology. There's this huge growth in AI spending. So a lot of venture capital firms are, giving multiple rounds of funding to big AI companies. But there's some, question about whether these rounds of funding are overvalued. Is AI actually going to produce a decent return on all this investment. So far, again, it's a lot of unknowns. Like one of the things we're seeing is that companies, they are starting to implement more AI. It's changing or displacing work in these companies, large companies. And I don't know that some of them are coming back reporting that you know savings are incremental, if any, that they can detect so far. And even though originally it was thought, well, we're going to save money maybe by letting workers go, now they're finding that their AI expenditure, in terms of tokens, for using the AI is, growing astronomically and sometimes outpacing what would have been paid for human salaries. So that's going on. And then the other thing is that a lot of these major companies, they set out projections for themselves in terms of their expenditure and profit making. And a lot of these companies are starting to show that it's like their expenditure is going up and extending beyond the original horizon that they mentioned. And so the profitability is not showing up, you know, as far as their projections, on same timelines or amounts as their original projections had estimated. So, and also what's interesting as well, besides the sort of, is it a coincidence, between the gold rush that's happening in Northern California and AI, because they're basically in the same area of the world. Um, that's a question. But also the current sky pattern is similar now during this AI development period, hot development period, and the California gold rush. So that's also interesting. So again, how can historical astrology inform, finance and economic trends? That's what I was interested in learning about. So if you're willing to go down that rabbit hole with me, then stay tuned. Okay, and then it was kind of funny, or maybe, is this also a coincidence? Probably not, but I was getting towards the end of putting this deck together, and then I saw this headline come through. It was tech sell-off sinks stocks as AI spending faces scrutiny. So that's pretty much, on topic here. This is from LinkedIn, and so I think the headline was, or the summary was, stocks fell on Thursday. This is Friday that I'm recording this, and I was, in the middle of putting this together on Thursday. Stocks fell on Thursday as the tech sector sell-off pushed the Nasdaq down 2.2%. The Nasdaq, if you're not familiar, is a large index of funds that are very tech heavy. Okay. So that tech heavy index went down in the stock market, reflecting growing investor concern over whether massive spending on artificial intelligence can justify the cost. So that's exactly, what I'm looking at, but from an astrological point of view. And the S&P 500 dropped 1.2%. That's another index. And the Dow slipped 1%, which is another index. The Dow is more like I call blue chip companies that are more long-term stable, maybe slower growth, but stable companies. Alphabet slumped 7% after the Google parent, that's Alphabet, boosted its 2026 capital spending forecast to as much as $205 billion. Okay, so you can see there were some heavy hits just even yesterday. Tesla, that's an electric vehicle company, tumbled 14% after the electric vehicle maker reported quarterly operating costs that rose faster than revenue. So you see, this is like a big deal. A lot of money, was involved here, a lot of big companies. So yeah, so anyway, let's look at it from the astrology point of view. All right, so again, just to give you an overview, what I'm going to be walking through. Tulips, gold, and AI. So the tulip trade in Holland, the prices of tulips went up astronomically, and they were selling for incredible prices. I mean, just amazing. There's a what is it? Drawing over here. This is of Semper Augustus. This was the highest selling tulip bulb in Holland at that time, and we're talking about like November 1636 to February 1637 was the hot period. Okay, which is pretty short lived because it was only like 3 months or so, but things went kind of crazy. So one bulb of this flower sold for what was in 2024 equivalent to 38,000 euro. That's like one flower bulb. I mean, That's pretty wild. So anyway, this is the first recorded financial bubble. And again, that's kind of the, question here is everybody just rushing into this, just sort of wildly? Is this grounded in anything? Well, we'll see what we can see. And then the California gold rush happened. Basically, gold was found January 4th, 1848 in California at Sutter's Mill. And then basically by 1855, the gold rush had ended because by that time, the gold nuggets that were like literally lying on the surface of soil were less easy to find, probably because most of them had been picked off by individuals. And the only way to find more gold was like to dig deeper. And so they had to come up with more like industrial groups and, equipment and stuff to do that. So there was this hot point for about 6, 7 years when, it was this massive influx of migrants to California, very, wild conditions people had to survive, um, claim jumping, all sorts of strange things were going on during this 7 year period. And then it cooled off. And then currently AI. So that's the question we have today. And the time point I'm going to look at for that is because AI has been developing since the 1950s in terms of the technology. But when did it really get on the radar of the public? When it really sort of took off? I think that most of the timelines point to when OpenAI launched ChatGPT in November 2022, which is just, not quite 4 years ago. So I'll be using that, looking at that time point as a general marker for, um, just the AI industry, growing. And again, one of the questions I have as part of this is the gold rush and AI. I mean, they're in the same location in the world. Is that a coincidence? I'm guessing not, but we'll see. But the other thing is that when we're looking at moments in time, that's just one part of the question, when you're looking at anything astrologically, at least in terms of Vedic astrology is concerned. Because if you want to really determine, the outcome of something, you want to look at three different factors. One is kala, and that's time, and that's what we'll be looking at today. Also kshetra, which is like translated as the field. And at the very end, I will be looking at kshetra in terms of the location in which, at least AI is being developed. And then patra is individuals. And I'm not including that in today's talk because I wanted to talk about the general, industry of AI rather than specific companies or heads of companies and that sort of thing. Um, so yeah, that's what we're going to be looking at today. And you might be asking, like, why am I not talking about the dot-com bubble that happened in the late 90s, 1990s? I thought about it, I looked at it, but the thing is, there was no clear precipitating event where I could cast a chart on a particular day. And so it was, kind of a slow build up. It kind of blew up fast, and then it all kind of crashed. So I guess I could have looked at the crash date, but that wouldn't have given us any kind of precursor information for that bubble even happening. So, I mean, that might have been nice because, again, the AI and .com, tech and tech maybe would have been nice, but it's not clear and easy day to cast a chart for that. So, all right, so let's see what we see now. Okay, so tulips first. All right, so this is the chart that I drew up for tulip mania. That's what they called it in Holland, where prices inflated dramatically, almost overnight. So the date here is the 12th of November, 1636 in Haarlem, Netherlands. Okay, and this is a Surya Lugna chart. So I don't have specific birth times or exact birth times for these charts. So what I did to compare apples to apples basically was to look at the sun charts for these moments of time that I'm going to be looking at today. Okay, so if you're not familiar, this is a North Indian style chart. That top diamond in the middle is what we call the ascendant, rising sign first house. All different names are the same thing. In Sanskrit, we say the lugna. Okay, that house is important because it sets a tone for the rest of the chart, the whole chart, really. And to get to the other houses, you start at the first house, the lugna, and you count inclusively going up and to the left or counterclockwise, So 1, 2. So the second house is that upside down triangle in the upper left corner with Saturn in it. That's the second house. Okay. Now the little 8 in the ascendant here, so right below Mercury and Sun, the little 8 refers to the 8th constellation of the zodiac, which is Scorpio. So this is a Scorpio rising chart, Scorpio ascending chart, or in Sanskrit we would say Vrishika Lagna. Okay. So just to give you a chance to look at this chart without any of my markings, but here we go. Okay. So I found this information, and the reason why I pulled up this date was I got this information from Wikipedia, and let's see, this is the Tulip Price Index from 1636 to 37, and you can see at November 12th, I've circled here, this is the date I used, you can see it goes up astronomically basically from that day, and it goes all the way up through December, and then on February 3rd, it basically like crashed after that. Okay, so that's the bubble that we're looking at. Now, again, this is a short-term bubble, but it still had effects. So on this day, so I also wanted to know, like, what happened on this day that everybody suddenly went crazy, like in terms of spending all this money on tulip bulbs. So on this day, what happened was future trading was introduced, started for tulip bulbs, which had been used for other commodities, I think, like grain and stuff like that. In Dutch, it's called windhandel, so wind trade. So basically, this was a market shock that suddenly let a whole lot of buyers into the market because basically you had to have a certain threshold of money to buy in, to buy anything. But with this future trading, they were basically wagering on what would bloom in the spring. So there were no actual physical assets, to trade, like at the farmer's market, trade for broccoli or onions or whatever. So they would accept like written IOUs. Okay. So it was like all this sort of like paper, all these like paper, promissory notes essentially. Okay. So basically it lowered the threshold for almost anybody, and almost anybody could enter the market. And then that inflated part of what inflated prices because there was competition now, um, at least based on paper, right? Um, yeah, so the other thing that was like pretty wild is that the courts, again, when everything went bust a few months later, um, the courts considered that these promissory notes or IOUs were basically gambling debts and were unenforceable. So people were left basically holding the bag, not the bulb, but the bag, like in terms of owing money to people and having no real legal recourse or, on both sides. So people weren't getting paid if they had accepted IOUs, and also they couldn't make good on the IOUs if they meant to. So yeah, so it was kind of chaotic. Okay, but let's start looking at this chart to see what we see here. So the lugna again and the Surya lugna. So this is a sun rising chart, and I'll be using sun rising charts for all the charts today, for the most part, except the very last one at the end. So the kshetra are field charts. But yeah, so we have a Scorpio rising, Vrishika in Sanskrit. This is a fixed water sign. So this is like steady, deep emotions. Water indicates emotion. So this is a very emotional type of endeavor, activity, moment in time. Primarily emotional, not grounded, but emotional, especially when you're wagering on bulbs that don't even exist yet, right? It was like a very emotional type of thing. So Sun Nakshatra, and a nakshatra is a lunar mansion. There are about 27 lunar mansions. They all have different energies and symbols associated with them. Sun Nakshatra here, and the moon passes through a different nakshatra every night. So after 27 nights, you get a lunar month. Okay. So the Sun Nakshatra at this time was Vishaka, which is like victory, but victory at all costs. Okay. And the sun is a fiery planet. It's also a leadership planet. So there's a lot of action and leadership, drive here, essentially. So it's about winning at all costs. And that makes sense, because it's like, why would anybody want to spend 38,000 euros or the equivalent of for one flower bulb, Um, I'm sure some people do and will, and they're happy about it and can afford it, but most people, it's out of their reach. So again, there's this victory at all costs, and the cost might have been even been just sort of logic. And then we have a Mercury here, which has Digbal or directional strength. So that's going to make Mercury strong. Mercury represents business, thoughts, ideas, decisions, words, communication. And Mercury's in Jyeshta nakshatra, which is symbolized by a talisman or like it's a protective type of energy. So this is protection of thoughts, business, ideas. Okay. So there's, again, this victory at all costs and protecting. So it's almost like this energy coming together is almost like a winning at all costs, and then protecting the thoughts or actions, like kind of following through, even if you end up losing, because on some level you're trying to protect something, even if it's like a losing bet. It's kind of that energy. Um, so yeah, and then the thing is, Sun here is the lord of the 10th house of work and reputation. So that's there. And then Mercury is the lord of the 11th house of clubs, group society, as well as income. So there was some drive to protect income here. And Mercury's also the lord of the 8th house of other people's money. So it's like trying to generate, income basically from other people's money. Okay, there's this kind of, again, arbitrage kind of situation going on here. So the Lugnatia is a ruling planet for the chart, and that's Mars. And we can see Mars is in the 3rd house here, which is interesting. So Mars is one. You can see it's just crossed into Capricorn. Okay, so since Mars is in the 1st degree of the 3rd house, we would call that Sunday. So anytime a planet crosses signs, it's unstable because it's changing elements. So Mars is unstable, and Mars represents actions, initiatives, courage, and it's in the 3rd house of courage. So this is like a really wild, throwing down, of things. It's even more wild because it's with Rahu, and Rahu is the north node of the moon, which is ambition, drive, hidden, unusual, erratic. So this is like when you get Mars and Rahu together, this can be like a wild goose chase type of energy, like just erratic ambition, like flailing around almost. Because Mars is erratic and Rahu's, wild, and so it gives like this almost manic kind of energy. Besides that, Mars is in the 10th constellation, Capricorn, where it's exalted. So this is going to be very strong, wild courage and actions here. Okay. Also, Jupiter is aspecting from the 11th house. Jupiter gives expansion. It also gives finance. It also gives um, And so this is like wild, and the 3rd house represents like nonverbal communication. Jupiter also represents publishing. So this is all these like, wild, writing out of these IOUs. It's looking like. And the 3rd house also represents siblings, neighbors, friends. So basically peer groups. And Jupiter is in the 11th house, which is kind of similar, which is clubs, group society. Okay. So in clubs, group society, right, the ruling planet for this chart has gone to a neighborhood place or community and is wildly, you know, publishing something frantically, courageously, though, wildly. Okay. So, and this Mars is also interesting because it creates what we call a karako bhava. So when we have Mars in the third house can also represent siblings, and Mars can represent siblings. But Mars in the 3rd house almost gives too much energy in that regard, and so it indicates problems with siblings. Mars also represents enemies, so we've got like, wild trading going on here. The 3rd house is also combustion or enjoyment. So this was kind of fun, it was like, I don't know, probably the equivalent of doing like really well on some like video game you just got kind of sucked into, like beginner's luck kind of. So anyway, all this together, erratic, unstable, impulsive, compulsive action behaviors. Because Rahu on its own and Ketu too, the nodes of the moon can indicate impulsive, compulsive, obsessive energy, and Mars is also impulsive, compulsive. So you have stacked together these two impulsive, compulsive planets, and then Jupiter is just like blowing it up. So so you can see where this like literally tulip mania is very good, a term for this. I mean, this is a manic type of episode here. Um, Trouble with siblings, neighbors, and peers. Yeah, when everything crashed and burned. Rahu's in the nakshatra of Shravana. Shravana is related to storytelling. So this could be people, again, the Shravana is like the history, right? And they're writing these little IOUs. I mean, this is like wildly giving away, you know, um, your livelihood or anything you may possess. Because like the IOUs were not just money, but they were like, okay, I'll give you blankets and pigs and horses and, farm equipment and, anything that they possess, they were putting in these IOUs. I mean, it's like this wild, and again, it was historical, right? I mean, that's how they learned about, partly how they learned about this, time in history was they had all these IOU, they had enough IOU notes that they could see like what people were essentially betting away. The thing that was that Jupiter, even though Jupiter is blowing this up, Jupiter's debilitated in the sign of Capricorn. And so there wasn't a lot of balance. So it was providing like fuel, or because when you get Mars and Jupiter together, you get enthusiasm. So there's enthusiasm to do all this like wild trading, but there wasn't a lot of balance. So, and Jupiter's in a nakshatra called Hasta, which is symbolized by hand. So when Jupiter is in that, there can be balance and control and handling things. But when you get Jupiter in debilitation sign, it's like the lack of balance and control and handling things. And this wild trading and nonverbal communication was going on. So yeah, ambition, bizarre actions, right, and also Jupiter and Mars Jupiter can represent law, and Jupiter and Mars can represent like legal problems. So if you gave away your pigs and horses, to somebody and were left with nothing, then oh well, it was on you according to the government. So yeah, writing, law, legal, control. This could also, again, this is back in the day, it was 1636 in Netherlands, but Mars and Rahu can indicate, like today, I would think of technology. Because Mars can represent machines, and like Rahu can, and Ketu can represent especially the internet. So internet technology is like, like Google or something like that, that kind of thing today. But yeah, this enthusiasm, manic. And the thing is, Mars, since it's the lord of the first house, it's drawing in the self. Like people are getting sucked into this like energy vortex, it looks like. And also, Mars is the lord of the sixth house of enemies, debts, acute problems. So all of that is getting sucked into this third house vortex. Yeah. Um, the third house lord, the other thing on top of that is the third house lord is Saturn. And Saturn has gone 12 houses away from the third. So 12 houses away from any house is a house of losses and expenditures. So this is like losing, and Saturn represents physical things, and Saturn here is in the second house of assets. So this is like, peers and neighbors like losing physical assets. Yeah, it's pretty wild. And also, Saturn is in an nakshatra called Purvashada, which is about sorting. So this is like sorting through the physical things you have, like should I give them my pigs or my horses or my farm equipment or my blanket, whatever you have, you're sorting through and like just, wagering it away essentially. So there's a physical sorting of the physical things that have been lost due to this wild manic activity. So already you're seeing like, okay, yeah, this is like people are acting in an unrational, manner. So okay, so then I just was looking at what else is in the chart here, just big items. So there are a few yogas. These are combinations that give extra meta effects beyond planet and house analysis. So we do have a Buddha Ditya yoga, that's Sun and Mercury in the same house conjoined. That gives an intelligence combination, especially in regards to computation, like math and science. There's a Kalasarpa yoga here. It's all the planets on one side of the Rahu, Ketu axis the other. That gives more ambition, more unusual energy to the chart. There's also a Parvata yoga. So this is, basically a leadership combination here. And yeah, so we've got those going on. So there is some, push here because again, Sun's at the top. That's a leadership planet. Mars is also the secondary leader. So Sun represents king, president, head of states, head of a business enterprise, and Mars is more the CEO, like hands-on, nitty-gritty, build it in the trenches kind of energy. Okay, but they're both fiery planets, so they're both transformational. And again, they have that organizing power and leadership power of others. So I just went through fairly quickly just to see what the other houses showed us, to see if there's anything else that was fairly relevant. So the second house, the Lord, is Jupiter, and Saturn is there in Purva shadow. So again, sorting through physical assets, and there's gains to be had. So probably, again, the IOUs probably, were worth nothing. But like they couldn't enforce them, but some people ended up with more cows and pigs and blankets at the end of the day. I think this is also sorting through physical assets. This is like the flowers, you know um because again there was some physical asset to be had, whether it was a bulb or a blanket or whatever. The other thing is that Saturn is the lord of the fourth house here, which represents ground, even underground. And Saturn is aspecting its own house in the fourth year. Um, so this could even be literally like assets, sorting through assets in the ground, meaning the tulip bulbs themselves. Like did they grow? Did they rot in the dirt? What happened here? And then Saturn aspecting its own sign, which is Aquarius in the fourth house here. Aquarius is a fixed air sign, so this is like fixed ideas, like fixed paradigms, and also like Saturn in Aquarius. I mean, this is like Saturn is a planet representing skepticism, doubt, fear, worry, anxiety, depression, all those things. The fourth house represents happiness potentially. So that's more on the depressive kind of side with Saturn on its own sign like that. Also, Saturn can represent property. So again, the physical goods that were traded besides the flowers. And then also Saturn can represent land. So there's several things here. So when I was seeing Saturn, and also Saturn in the fourth house, Saturn in the second house and the fourth house. The second house represents like family, inner circle, as well as like early childhood years. And the fourth house is like a little bit later in life, but also family, home, lineage. Saturn on both those houses indicates poverty, so that's pretty tough there, potentially. And when I was seeing this Saturn here, in Purvashada, 12th from the third here, it was almost like somebody was like, sorting through change in their pocket, like to see if they had any pennies left. Like it kind of had that kind of energy to it. So, um, yeah. And we see the fifth house here. The Lord is Jupiter. Jupiter's aspecting its own house, and also there's Venus is aspecting there. So there's exaltation of Venus and Swa Jupiter in the fifth house. The fifth house represents counseling, and Venus and Jupiter are the two counseling planets. They're also the two finance planets, and just like Jupiter, Venus is in Hasta Nakshatra. So this is like advice about controlling, you know, um, uh, finances here. Jupiter, Venus especially can represent things like flowers and exotic items, which were these tulip bulbs, especially the ones with stripes, because most of those were like developed through viral infections, and these bulbs came from all over the world. So this is like, and so there's this hasta hand energy because hasta symbol of hasta is a hand. So it's literally like grabbing the goods, like advice to grab the goods. So there's this like grabbing exotic flowers, financial advice type of energy going on here. And usually Venus and Jupiter, when you get the benefics together, it sounds really great. Like you get the benefics together, it sounds really great. But the thing is, like when you get the benefics together, especially Venus and Jupiter, they're such like lofty, dreamy planets, and they're diplomatic and they're compassionate and they're social and they're charitable and all this kind of stuff. like when you get a bunch of benefics together, you can show up with good things in your life for sure, but also like it's almost like this kind of party kind of energy where it's like so good, so optimistic, so lovely that may not feel like working. Like you may not, you just want to go let loose and enjoy and all this, because Jupiter is expanding Venus, which is socializing and the finer things of life and all the goodies in life. And, when you have that kind of energy going on, you can let your boundaries loose if you have boundaries, and just kind of hang out, chill out, enjoy, party, and are less kind of stringent or strict with your thoughts, ideas, actions, kind of thing. So, um, it's not. I mean, clearly, what's going on in the third house is like wild manic activity. But then it's like this Venus Jupiter, and the Venus and Jupiter is in the 11th house of clubs, group, society. So all of this was happening in taverns where people are like drinking and socializing. So, you've got your peer pressure going on, you've got your liquid courage going on, like those things are sort of greasing the wheels in terms of all this wild, activity about price of tulip bulbs. Um, so yeah, that was there. That actually probably added to this inflated optimism, about these tulip bulbs. But then the sixth house here, the Lord is Mars, which we know is exalted, but Sunday, so exaggerated, and it's aspecting its own sign, so it's going to be strong in the sixth house. And again, sixth house is enemies, accidents, debt. So those are all going to be strong. And Moon is there, which represents the mind and also the public. So public, a lot of strong public debt. Moon was either in Bharani Nakshatra or Kritika Nakshatra. They're both pretty intense nakshatras. Bharani is more about like cycles, like it's the symbol is a womb, so cycles of birth and death. So this is some new public thing that was born all of a sudden. Um, and then Kritika is another nakshatra, and that's about fighting and nurturing. So again, both intense. So again, strong. Either way, there's a strong public enemies born, fighting for wealth type of energy, which was clearly there. And then the seventh house, the Lord is Venus, which is debilitated, and Virgo in the 11th house. Um, so Venus, it's kind of funny. Venus isn't even that strong, and Venus is the planet that most represents exotic flowers. So again, this is like an inflated like idea to get these bulbs, which are, you know, they're not super great. I mean, if Venus and Jupiter were both in, in Pisces here, where Jupiter's swa in its own sign and Venus is exalted, that would be a different story than a debilitated Venus aspecting. There's still a lot of financial advice, but again, it's about a debilitated Venus. So, yeah, that's kind of funny. Um, and then the seventh house is also aspecting Sun, Mercury, and Jupiter here. So, Mercury and Jupiter is a lot of news and communication, writing. Sun is, again, leadership here. But Venus is, again, debilitated. So, and yeah, I would say like unstable partners or not, most, how would I say? Maybe unstable is not the right word. Like not the highest level, not the best partners to go into business with you. Not unstable. Venus is stable, but they're not like you don't want to go into business necessarily with a destabilized or debilitated Venus. Not ideally, but so again, all these like manic notes that were IOUs that were written, I mean, how many of them were actually came through on anything? Maybe none of them. I don't know. I'm sure a few did, but probably not much. This is like leading though, and then again, there's these protective words and actions and ideas. This is also like communicating through hearsay, like grapevine, word of mouth. Like, I mean, I'm sure they didn't. I'm guessing. I'm not sure. I'm guessing they didn't like have this like, up to date, digital. Well, I know they didn't have that up to date digital board where you knew about the price of this type of bulb and that type of bulb and blah 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 blah. I mean, it's almost like when I see pictures of the stock trading pit in New York, where you have all these people like yelling at each other and making signals, and I don't even know what all that means, but it kind of gave me that vision came to my head when I was looking at this. So yeah, so that's the first half of the chart. What else do we have here? Okay, so the second part of the slide, we've got the eighth house. The Lord is Mercury, aspected by Saturn. So yeah, I mean, so again, Saturn on the eighth house. Eighth house is deep psychology. So again, fear, doubt, worry, anxiety, depression. I mean, this is a Stira Jal chart. It's a fixed water sign chart. So this is going to be like a very emotional, type of energy, generally speaking here. So also consider sorting through physical assets, of others, of yourself and others, fear and doubt. I mean, this is almost like a name your price type of energy here because prices went up so fast, so high so fast. It's like, how do you even keep up with that? So there was a lot of anxiety related to this. And the other thing is that this Saturn here is on, write that down. Hold on, let me check something. Okay, so yeah, I didn't write it down, but I was thinking it. So Saturn in the second house is not only on the eighth house, but so Saturn is on the second house of assets. It's aspecting the eighth house of other people's money. It's also aspecting the 11th house of income. And Saturn is a planet of delays, obstacles, endings, chronic problems. So I don't know that anybody really, got rich here, because Saturn is on the three money houses here. I mean, maybe a few people walked off with some extra blankets or whatever, but and this happened so, it was like a, hard hit, I mean, fast and hard, but it kind of blew over. Um, it's not like it went, I think, deep. I'm sure a few people like lost out and stuff like that, but I don't know that this is like massive, nationwide infrastructure, changes that couldn't be reversed and all this kind of stuff. So, yeah, there's that. Then the ninth house here, the Lord is Moon, which is in the sixth house of enemies. And then Ketu is here in Ashlesha Nakshatra. So, aspected by Mars. So that's interesting because Mars and Ketu bring this like explosive energy, and Ashlesha is a snake. So this could be like, attention grabbing kind of stuff. And, Ketu and Mars are in the ninth house. That's like authority. So I don't think the government did much, like was alerted to what was going on, but I don't know that they went in and did much about this. I think they just sort of stood by the wayside and kind of let it blow in and out on its own. They were kind of like hands off, of this. So, yeah, this is like almost like a lack of any kind of governments or order to any of this. It was just wild and woolly. And then the 10th house here, the Lord is Sun, and then it's aspected by Mars. So Mars is going to be, action. We know it's with Rahu, and we know it's unstable. It's an unstable planet. It's unstable also because it's Sunday in the first degree. So this is going to be constant, ambitious action, kind of like manic energy in the day to day. Then the 11th house, the Lord is Mercury. We have a debilitated Venus there with Jupiter, aspected by Saturn. And the 11th house, as well as the 8th house, can symbolize gambling. So again, this is like friendly social gatherings here. That's also income. It's also clubs, group society. So again, there's some social place here. And then again, the Saturn is really putting like a dent into all that. Kind of, even though it was social or whatever, and people were enjoying themselves or whatever, like the Saturn's casting kind of a dark cloud over all that. And people took a step back, they didn't get sucked into this whirlwind that's going on. Um, But this could be like, and also sorting through this gambling on the market, also sorting through bad advice about exotic goods. If you actually listen to some of these people who are in the middle of this, then, again, sometimes just the ideas are contagious, even if they don't make a lot of rational sense. But that's how it goes sometimes, things blow up like that. Um, then the 12th house here, the Lord is Venus, which is debilitated and it's aspected by the moon. So again, this could be, since Venus is the Lord of the 12th and it's gone 12 houses away. So Venus is bhavam here. In that sense, this could be like the end of losses. Um, so like, I'd say like the end of like the social futures, say like the ability, like basically the technology. I mentioned technology when I was talking about Mars and Rahu in the third house. So the technology was not a computer interface like we would have today, but the technology was just being able to write, like be able to bet on futures of something that didn't exist yet and write an IOU for it. So that was the technology of the time. So there's like this, social gambling that's going on. And potentially, even though it wasn't well advised, there's at least like, even though it didn't really work out or pan out in like a sustainable way for tulips, just the fact that like it was introduced into the tulip market at that time, it became a technology that was then applied to other goods, like agricultural goods, for example. So if that makes sense. So I don't think it helped here, but actually, because the debilitated Venus went to the social group. So again, it might have been that again social groups lost, but there were also gains in terms of they had another way to potentially bet and make money. Yeah. So when I was looking at like the finances specifically for this chart, again, Saturn is on the second, eighth, and 11th houses. That's going to bring a lot of just, keep things from really, even though prices went up, I don't think, I don't know, maybe a couple people got super rich, but again, not like on the same scale as like the California gold rush. Okay. Saturn's going to keep this tamped down. But Mercury is a key for this chart in terms of finances because it's the lord of the eighth house of other people's money, as well as the 11th house of income. And Mercury doesn't seem like it's doing a whole lot because it's in a neutral house and it's with a natural malefic sun. But Mercury is in its own star because Mercury is in Jyesta nakshatra and the star of Jyesta is Mercury. So actually, Mercury's stronger than it looks at first glance. Okay. So there is some strength to Mercury here. And also, Mercury is visible, it's not combust. So this is like some people did, end up with money here. But also, Mercury is a dual planet. So it's like a 50, it's like flipping a coin, like 50-50 maybe. And also, all the money houses in this chart. The second house is ruled by Jupiter, which is the other dual planet. The eighth and 11th houses are dual signs. So it's like a split energy here. Some people are going to win, some people are going to lose. Okay, so Mercury's the key, I would say, here, that some money was had. And like, Mercury's also about ideas and thoughts and decisions. So I think that's part of what kind of blew up here. It was more on like a idea and thought realm more than again, there were some physical things to sort through, but there was some strength here for this to even get to this. It was only a short period, a few months, but even to make it through the annals of history, you know so I know about it, thousands of years later, or hundreds of years later. uh there's something to it. There's some strength here, in terms of finance. Jupiter is the lord of the second house, which is not super strong. Jupiter's is not in a friend sign. It's not it's with the debilitated planets. So, that's the house, it's the lord of the house of assets here. At least Saturn is there though. So there's some assets, physical assets being, tossed about here, but that's about it. The other thing I was thinking about is like, again, this is like hard and fast. So again, November 12th through, what was it, February 3rd or 5th or something. So what is that? December, basically 3 months. Not even that, right? December, January. Yeah, barely 3 months was when this really blew up. So I was thinking, I bet this has something to do with like a fast moving planet. And when I saw Mercury, I was like, well, Mercury changes signs about every 3 weeks. But when it goes retrograde, um, it's going to stay in a sign longer typically. Like it might be in a sign for almost, it depends on where it is, but it can be like 2 months, 3 months, depending on where it is. Like that's on the long side. But so I was wondering if Mercury went retrograde during this time, and it did. It was like, there you go. So Mercury, like I think it was a day or two after this, Mercury went retrograde. So Mercury kind of stayed in this Jesta position. So protecting income, protecting other people's money, the idea of it at least, and the words about it, it stayed in Jesta. It backed up into Anurata, which is about like alliance, victory through alliance, which again feeds into this Venus-Jupiter combination in the 11th house. And then it moved out of Scorpio, and then it hits Mula Nakshatra, December 12th. Okay, and Mula is about planting, literally about planting things. Like the symbol of Mula is a bunch of roots tied together. But Mula, the deity of Mula is Nriti, which is a form of the goddess Kali, the goddess of death and destruction. So even though Mercury rolled through the second house of gains, like it, I think that's when like things started. I'd have to look at the chart again. That's probably when things started kind of slipping, like in terms of the prices. Like maybe the prices weren't going up quite so fast or quite so high. It started slowing down, and then what was it? The other thing that happened, uh, we'll see on the next slide, but it makes sense in terms of the timing of this being like a hard and fast, like kind of wild, bizarre blip on the screen of history. But because Mercury was so important financially for this chart, and Mercury's a fast moving planet, well, there you go. Okay, that's part of it here. Um, and again, Mercury is stronger, I would say, than Jupiter because it's in its own star. But again, you can see with the Saturn that there's a lot of, you know, problems here. But I did also cast a chart for the time when things pretty much crashed out here. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so this is when the tulip mania bubble burst. Okay. So again, I oriented this so this is also a Scorpio rising chart. So we're comparing similar charts. But Mars has shifted now out of its exaltation sign with Rahu. It was in the third house. Now it's in the uh, fifth house here of counseling. It's also aspected by Jupiter. So this could be like legal counseling, frankly. Also, now Mars is in a nakshatra called Uttarabhadrapada. The symbol of that is the back legs of a funeral pyre. So it's like after things have burned down. Okay, like things have burned down. Now it's time to do something different and transcend the chaos that's occurred before. And Jupiter is now this Jupiter in Hasta is providing balance on Mars. So it's like getting, back down to earth, doing things, calming down, taking the edge off of this wild Mars trip it was on for a while. Yeah. And then the third house, now we have a Pravrajya. We have all these planets on the third house. So what's interesting is we had Mars exalted in Jupiter when this first started, 12th of November. And now Saturn is there, Swa, and Saturn is like almost the exact opposite planet of Mars. Mars is innovative, rebellious, erratic, compulsive, impulsive. Saturn's like long and slow, delays, take your time, structure. So look, and Saturn has just crossed into Capricorn. Okay, and it's with Rahu. It's gonna tame this Rahu. Okay. Because Saturn's gonna dominate, since Saturn's in its own sign, it's gonna dominate Rahu, Mercury, and Sun. So it's gonna calm down the Sun. It's also aspecting Mars. Okay, the two fire planets. We're going to calm down the two fire transformation planets, leadership planets. We're going to calm down Mercury. Okay, we're going to slow down this wild Rahu. We're going to bring, I mean, this is like almost the exact opposite energy of what was before. And now Venus, instead of being debilitated in Virgo, now you have it in the second house. And Venus is the practical counselor. So now you're getting gains through Venus. Yeah. And Venus is in Purvashada, so sorting through like what's practical advice given the fallout of what just happened, you know. So let's see. Let me just see if I got everything here. Dominates. Da, 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 da. And then let's see. Oh yeah. So Mercury is bhavat bhavam. Eighth house lord has gone 8 houses away. So this is like one chronic problem after another in the neighborhood. So trying to sort all that out. And Mercury and Sun are both in Dhanashta, which is about rhythm. So this is about like, you know, slowing down this ambitious, you know, wild rhythm or lack of rhythm that was there before and trying to get things back in order. The other thing is this is just off of a solar eclipse. You can see like Rahu and Sun are pretty close together here. This is about a week after a solar eclipse. So this also could have affected why all of a sudden, like there was this fast rise and then things just crashed and burned essentially. But there's multiple chronic effects that, you know, occurred here. And let's see. Aspecting the ninth house. Yeah, so restoring. So this is again like restoring order and balance, and also this massive Saturn is aspecting the ninth house of governance and authority. Venus in the second house, so gains from practical advice. Also, Venus, you know, is the lord of the seventh house of partnerships here. So there could be some partnership losses because Venus has gone 8 houses away. But Moon is there in the second house exalted. So now this is kind of like a, you know, almost like a getting back to order and law and order and, you know, kind of getting our senses back instead of being so wild, you know, kind of thing. Let's see. Moon is exalted in the seventh house aspects of the Lagna. So Moon is either in Kritika, which is a fighting, nurturing energy, or it's just about to go into Rohini, which is the most attractive type of, you know, nakshatra here. So this could be a public shift of the mind from fighting to stability, also like cooling things down, becoming creative, you know, restoring emotions, like clear emotions as opposed to wild, manic kind of emotions. And also this Jupiter in Hasta, um, you know, on Mars. And again, Mars is the ruling planet for the chart. This is like calming down the whole chart, not just Mars. So yeah, you can see like things really shifted and downshifted pretty quickly here, just because of what was happening in the sky. Okay, so let's start talking about the gold rush now. All right, so here's the chart for when the gold rush officially began. So gold was found at Sutter's Mill in Northern California, Coloma, California specifically, on January 24th, 1848. And again, I have a sun rising chart here, Surya Lagna, because I don't have an exact birth time for when that gold, first big gold nugget was found. But let's see. Okay, so before I went and dove into this chart, I just wanted to see already were there any similarities between this chart and the tulip chart. Again, because what I was trying to see if there were any, you know, things to look out for, alert for, in terms of developing a financial bubble. So there are actually quite a few similarities between this and the tulip chart. So Sun conjunct Mercury. That's not always a big deal because Mercury is so close to the Sun. It's the closest planet to the Sun. So Mercury is often with Sun. If it's not with the Sun, it's in the sign before or after the Sun. But you know, maybe half the time, a third of the time, Sun and Mercury are not together. So And again, there's this intelligence combination that comes from that through yoga combination, math, science, calculation type of intelligence. Also, Saturn is in the second house again. So gains through physical assets. That's going on here. Also, that Saturn will be aspecting the financial houses. It's on the second house. It's aspecting the eighth house, also aspecting the 11th house. So that's similar. So again, I think that since Saturn is on the money houses, again, most of what we're talking about with the tulips and the gold are like physical assets, rather than like cash. So we've got that. We have Rahu and Ketu on the 3 and 9 axis again. Again, they're in opposite houses, but they have similar energies in terms of this kind of wild, unusual, bizarre type of energy. And again, they're in the third house of nonverbal communication and neighbors, peers, siblings, and also the ninth house of authority. So I was like, okay, I mean, that's pretty interesting. And this time, instead of Mars being on the Rahu Ketu axis, we have Moon on the Rahu Ketu axis. So Rahu and Ketu can symbolize illusion, delusion, confusion, and especially when you have Mercury or Moon on the Rahu Ketu axis, that's amplified. So from this, I was like, yeah, there's a lot of obsessive energy, compulsive energy going on here, both in terms of actions, also in terms of the um, again, the authority or lack of authority going on here. Yeah, so Mars, Mars is in a different house, but it's still aspecting the 10th house of day-to-day work. So Mars is innovation, it's physical, it's actions. Um, so that's similar. Innovative, pioneering actions for work and reputation. I mean, that's what that time is known for. Venus is in the 11th house again. I mean, I was like, wow, there's like so many similar. It's kind of amazing, actually. Venus is on the 11-5 axis again. So again, Venus influencing income, groups, and advice. The nakshatras, there are a lot of similar nakshatras. Bharani, for tulips, Moon was in Bharani. This chart's Mars is in Bharani. So that life cycle energy, something being born. Also Hasta, 2 planets in the last chart, and Rahu in this chart. So again, Rahu is like this, already an ambitious type of energy. But now Rahu is in Hasta in the ninth house. So this is like government grabbing control, which is essentially what happened. Once all this gold was found, basically the individual, like I mentioned, picked off the easy bits on top of the soil, but then, enterprise and government took control to really capitalize off this moment. And we have Jesta. So in the first chart, Mercury's in Jesta. In this chart, Venus is in Jesta. So there's a protective energy. Uttarashada, Mars in the last chart, Mercury in this chart. Uttarashada is about a sudden victory here. That's going on. And then Shravana, in the last chart, it was Rahu. In this chart, Sun is in Shravana, and Rahu is actually aspecting Sun. So there's still some Rahu. So again, wild storytelling. Yeah, so all this together, like birthing energy, grabbing energy, protection energy, sudden victory, storytelling. I mean, there's a lot of, it's amazing how many similar energies are, between the tulip chart and this chart. Now, again, the tulip chart, that mania, I mean, there was growing price inflation of tulip bulbs, but like it really blew up for those last few months. And the gold rush lasted for about 6 or 7 years before in 1955, again, to get to the bigger veins of gold or whatever, like you had to go in with a group of people and have some pretty heavy duty equipment and stuff like that. So, but based on this, there's a lot of similar placements of planets. I mean, what do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's basically 6 planets almost in the same house, not sign, but house. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 nakshatras. I mean, that's a lot of similar energy. So that kind of blew me away. But let's see what else we get from the analysis. All right, so this chart is not a Scorpio rising. This is a Capricorn rising chart. Capricorn's a movable Earth, so Chara Prithvi chart. So literally moving Earth, which you'd have to do right? Sifting through all the photos they have or images they have of people standing in the river and shaking pans of dirt to pick out flecks of gold and stuff like that. So literally moving the earth here. Sun's in Shravana, so this is and sun can represent gold. So this is like a story potentially of gold. And Mercury's right at the top, like the last chart, and Mercury can be speech. So this could, although Mercury is probably, this might be, since Mercury's so close to the sun, it's combust. So this isn't going to be like outright speech. And actually, because Saturn, since Saturn is in the second house here, Saturn can suppress speech because the second house is oral communication. So this might be like, a few trickles of, going through the grapevine of some story about gold. But this is also, this storytelling energy is also going to be, history for a government, which it was for California, history making moment. So Mercury is combust, but it also is digbal, so there's some strength, but it's hidden, it's unseen. And Mercury's an Uttarashada, so this could literally be like, maybe like a silent cry. Is that how they say? Silent cry of saying, like what was the phrase they used to use? Eureka, I found gold. Like when somebody would, they'd be panning, the dirt all day, and then when somebody actually found something, they would literally shout out, Eureka, I found gold. And that became the motto for California because of this gold rush. So that was interesting. The other thing is that Mercury, so Sun represents president, king, authority, and Mercury is the lord of this ninth house, which is the house of authority. So this could again be enterprises, not just a government, but like enterprises, organizations that were kind of silently, maybe a little sneakily, going in and grabbing the gold, whatever they could, that could be going on here. Then we have the Lugnatia, the ruling planet for the chart is a Saturn that's in the second house. And Saturn is Swa, it's in its own sign of Aquarius here. Now, Saturn's in the nakshatra of Shatabisha, which translates as 100 healers. So this could be something difficult to ameliorate, something difficult to do. Like, even though there's gains of physical gains here, and that's literally like nuggets of gold or flakes of gold or whatever you could find, there's still like problems with it, long-term chronic problems. Yeah. And this Saturn is aspecting the eighth house, which is other people's money, but it's also the house of deep psychology. So we've got Moon on the Rahu Ketu axis indicating mental health. We have Saturn on the eighth house indicating mental health. I was like, there's probably, it's probably a really tough time in people's life, even though it's like kind of famous and kind of glorified now. Um, but Saturn literally can also mean property and land. So there's gains through property and land. And since Saturn is the lord of the first house here, this is drawing the self into the second house, which is an artisana, a house of wealth. Also, this is an inner circle, which is, one might be mostly standing alone here because Saturn would be like a delay or obstacles with inner circle. So this might be loneliness, isolation. Second house is also like how we nourish ourselves, like starvation. Potentially. I mean, this is delays and obstacles in terms of what you feed yourself. And there were people were starving here. The other thing is there were a bunch of people looking for gold, but actually, from what I understand, the people who really got rich were the people who were supporting the people looking for gold. So, it was like the people. What do they say? Shovels were more profitable than golds at that time because they would jack up the prices of shovels and picks and food. Like I think eggs at that time, like the price translated would be like the equivalent of paying $10 for one egg or something like just skyrocketing prices because they were price gouging these wild ambitious people looking for gold. So um also physical difficult, this could be like difficulty engineering, Part of the reason why is Saturn is aspecting its debilitation sign in the 4th house here, and Mars is there. So we have the two Bhumikarakas, planets representing land and property, in the 4th house of land and property. But since Saturn's debilitated there, this is like destroying, the land. And there were problems there because people would just, look for their gold and didn't care, what happened to the land. So this is actually the beginning also of land and environmental protection laws and stuff like that, because there were no laws. It was just like, do whatever you want, and there's actually vigilante violence. There was claim jumping and all this story. It was kind of a crazy time. So, yeah, so this is not, an easy time for sure. Then we have, like, see, Sun is the lord of what? 8th house of, again, other people's money, deep psychology, chronic problems. So Sun is a pure temporal malefic. There's a big story of gold here, but not without consequence. Let's put it that way. And then Mercury is 6 and 8. Oh, Mercury's the lord of the 6th. So Mercury's the lord of the 6th house of acute problems. Sun is the lord of the 8th house of chronic problems, and both of those planets are on the top here. Short-term problems, long-term problems, all kinds of problems. What's different about this chart, now Jupiter is in the 3rd house or 6th house of acute problems also, but it's aspecting the 12th house, which is its own sign. So even though there's clearly some mental health issues here, physical issues here, starvation, poverty, like all kinds of stuff. And Jupiter is another planet that represents gold. Okay. Jupiter's aspecting its own sign itself, basically protecting from losses and expenditures for gold and not inanimate things, not animate, things, because people are clearly, in trouble here. We have, what's it? Rahu on the moon, that's a natural malefic. We have Saturn and Mars on Venus. So there are a lot of emotional problems, mental problems here. What else do we have here? Swa, Saturn aspecting. Yeah, I just mentioned that. So digging underground, worry, fear, trying to protect valuable assets and physical goods is Venus and Jesta in the 11th house. This is like the community, clubs and groups who are basically supplying the shovels and the food or whatever. And those are the people that got rich, like the people who really got rich in the long term, like who is it? I'll talk more about him later, but Leland Stanford, he was one of the people that bankrolled the development of the railroad, because the railroad basically developed all the way this far to the Pacific coast because of this gold rush here, because all these people were coming in and stuff like that, flooding the place. Okay, so let's look at these other houses here. The 3rd house, the Lord is Jupiter. It's gone to a 6th house, so there's some problems here. Also, Ketu's there in Uttar, so this is like aspected by a Sunday moon, unstable moon. Moon was in Uttar Falguni most of the day except for the first few minutes, so we can say it's confidently in Uttar Falguni. But Moon and Ketu in the 3rd house. Again, 3rd house is neighbors, siblings, peers, and Jupiter's gone to negative house. I mean, this is like hostile neighbors, leaving home, leaving friends, uh, leaving neighbors. What else do they have? A revolving door, that could also be part of it too, because Jupiter is in Punarvasu, so this is coming back and forth. And also, the symbol of Punarvasu is a quiver of arrows, so it's sharp pointed instruments. This is like maybe literally getting stabbed in the back. And again, these are all dual signs here, the 3rd house, 6th house, what are the 9th house, 12th houses. These are all like, 50-50 chance here. But there's a lot of like hostile energy in the 3rd house here. Mental health I mentioned. Also, this revolving door could also be like foreigners, or not just like literally overseas, but people not from the area. or even like, like non-natives. I mean, because that's part of the fallout from all this too, is that a lot of native tribes actually were devastated by this complete influx of all these people not native to California. Um, this could also literally be mind poison, because Ketu and Rahu can symbolize poison. Moon is on there, and what was I saying here? Oh, and when I was reading about it, I was like, I don't know, is that like too harsh or too extreme or too literal? I was like, why did that come to my mind? But apparently, Mercury, which is right at the top of this chart here, was used to extract gold. And Mercury, again, there's mercury toxicity. So mercury people experience more mercury poisoning by looking for gold, which would like affect their nervous system, their mental health. And they described like there was just this wild, crazy time where people were basically manic, desperate, taking irrational risks. Also, the harsh reality of the mines. People were losing like fingernails and fingers and all this stuff, starving to death. Besides the isolation and homesickness, because all these people left home to like run after the story of gold. Um, Also, there was a post-traumatic stress disorder from violence because there's no laws here. I mean, it was like survival of the fittest. Uh, Also, I was reading, which again, because already I'm seeing all these indications for like mental health issues and stuff. This actually blew up the psychiatric hospital system in California because the psych hospitals are full of people dealing with this wild gold rush time. I'm like, wow, that's deep. So you can see, like already, this is like a lot more um, deep and long, and in terms of the outcomes and results, compared to the tulip thing that happened for like a few months. Okay, again, this was only 6 or 7 years, but I mean, this is like massive difference here in terms of outcome. So yeah, so there's a lot of wild stuff going on. Then the fifth house, the Lord is Venus, aspect its own house. So this is like protecting yourself, protecting, your goods, protecting any assets you have. Um, and Rahu was there too. So, and Rahu is in that hasta. So this is like advice to, take massive control, over anything valuable you have. And you can see Venus is Sunday as well. It's about to cross into Sagittarius. So the other thing is that looks like there was advice and ambition to protect exotic goods, also like exotic flowers and plants and all this sort of thing. Because Venus can be those things. It became like a generational thing, and that's kind of what California is known for, right? I mean, yeah, there's been a lot of stuff that's gone down and environmental pollution, but usually they're one of the first places in the world that starts to, come up with laws to prevent that stuff from happening. So then the sixth house here, the Lord is Mercury, and there's a retrograde Jupiter from Vati there. So this could be trouble uh, with ideas going back and forth or news going back. So this is like untrustworthy news. Also, going back and forth in terms of the actions of, literal physical actions of panning for gold. I mean, people were like, killing their backs, bending over and lifting rocks and panning, even the light stuff, they were bending over for hours at a time. Also, this could be gold. And then this might also be like, um, somebody asking the question, like, I mean, Jupiter represents wisdom and balance. And this is not, this whole moment in time, even the 6 or 7 years, was not about, it was about extremes. It wasn't about balance. It wasn't about wisdom. It wasn't about sustainability. And it wasn't sustainable, ultimately. So, and what's interesting is Jupiter, again, that's the spiritual counselor, and Venus is the practical counselor. Jupiter's in a negative sign. Venus is about to enter a negative sign. I mean, this is actually pretty tame compared to what will happen come in the next, few weeks or months, once word gets out, then it's gonna, all hell's gonna break loose, I think. So yeah, so the second half of the chart, let's look at that. Or the middle part of the chart, I should say. So the seventh house, the Lord is a Sunday moon. And so moon is in between, kind of squeezed in between the aspect of Saturn and Rahu. So that's pretty tough. And the seventh house is aspected by Mars, where it's debilitated, Mercury and Sun. So Mars and Sun, the two fire planets, competition, fighting, erratic actions. I mean, this is like Wild West survival of the fittest kind of stuff. Also, Sun and Mars together bring a, president CEO type of energy. But this is going to be a wild CEO because they're debilitated. Mars is debilitated in Saturn or in seventh house. So the other thing is that since Moon is the lord of the seventh house and it's gone to the ninth year, I was like, I bet a bunch of these like really fiery people who, even if they weren't technically president CEO, because there were no real organizations in there, or there were only a few organizations that were formally, made, legal or whatever. A lot of these people ended up in government, and that's actually what happens. So Leland Stanford, I mentioned a little bit, he supplied miners, and he basically bankrolled the laying down foundation of the railroad, made a bunch of money that way, and he became the first Republican governor of California. He became a U.S. senator, and also Stanford University in Palo Alto is named after him. So here you go. And then uh, Peter Hardiman Burnett, I guess he mined for a while, worked at Sutter Sport. He became the first governor of California. And then, so you can see there's like this massive astronomical rise here, like going from mining to, digging in the dirt to becoming governor of the state. John Fremont, so there's a town named after him. He's an explorer, soldier, gold baron, U.S. senator, governor of Arizona territory. I was like, wow. And then John Sutter, the guy who owned the mill where that first kind of gold nugget or whatever was found, he became part of the delegation to draft the first California Constitution, and his son became a consul to Mexico for a couple decades. So again, a lot of these people started off like literally, with their hands in the dirt, and then very quickly, more often than not, or more than you would in most other places, like ended up running the place. So but that's all this like Sun Mars energy here. I mean, that's a lot of firepower. So, and this Mars debilitated, in the seventh house. I mean, they're gonna any which, is what is it? Catch what catch can, or is that the phrase where it's like any which way you can survive and thrive, like do that. It's like there aren't any real rules here. We'll make them up if we need any. But again, Jupiter is the planet representing, law and order, and it's in the sixth house. So that's part of why things were so wild, is there were no rules. So yeah, it's pretty wild. And let's see the rest of the chart. So the eighth house, the Lord is Sun, and maybe Moon was there, in the first half of the day. So either way, Moon is on the Rahu K2 axis, or Moon is aspected by Saturn. Either way, that's not good news for the Moon to have a natural malefic on it, because that's going to affect the mind and emotions. But deep psych issues, doubt, worry, fear, skepticism, and again, issues underground, which is where you find gold, right? Typically, unless you have so much it's just floating on the surface of the soil. I mean, I can't even imagine. Like, you just walk into your backyard and there's like old pieces floating. So it's kind of a funny image. Then the ninth house here, the Lord is Mercury, Rahu, probably the moon. So unseen, hidden victory. So again, this is like a very ambitious, enterprising authority, but also government here, but also fairly, um, grabbing control of the land. I mean, it's in Virgo, which is a dual earth sign. So trying to keep things together here rather than splitting apart. I mean, I guess if you had that many strong leaders, pioneering leader, fiery people there, it could have split off into 10 different states instead of kept California as one whole state. especially if these guys are all like fiery, they probably all fight and compete with each other. So, let's see, unseen sin victims. Yeah, public control, taking public control of public in the land here, is in the ninth house of authority. 10th house, the Lord is Venus, aspected by Mars and Jupiter. So enthusiasm, kind of like that tulip chart, land, gold, laws, but there were no laws, claim jumping, violence. The conditions were really deplorable in terms of, health and safety, mental health, all that at that time. And then the 11th Lord here was Mars, while Mars aspecting its own sign. So super strong, plus Saturn and Venus there. I mean, this is like engineering groups. This is like I kind of have an image in my head right now of like old saloon towns, where there'd be like a one little, I mean, just like I don't even know if you would call it a street, but like a little clearing with just like a convenience store type of place where you could buy some goods and like like to eat, and then maybe it's the same store where you buy whatever equipment, but like they're jacking up the prices because they're like, okay, well, you go find your gold, but make sure you drop off whatever cash you have, before you go after this. So yeah, so the social groups here, again, it looks like they really created a situation where they benefited regardless of, and basically stepped out of this risk taking role, both physical, mental health, as well as the, am I actually going to find any gold today? Kind of, it's like, no, cash is fine. Whatever cash you got, hand it this way. And so the people supporting all these 49ers, they called them, yeah, they made a lot of money, a lot of them. So also protecting luxury goods. So again, this is price gouging, I would say, supplies. The 12th house here, the Lord is Jupiter aspect to Sun. So again, the protection of inanimate objects. Um, but again, by the time 1855 rolled around a few years later, it wasn't so easy to just walk into your backyard and find some gold on the top of the surface. You had to actually do more. So but yeah, all of this, basically 300,000 people migrated to California in this amount of time, a few years. 750,000 pounds of gold were extracted. That's a lot of gold. I mean, like crazy amounts of gold. But again, there was devastation of land, native peoples. But the thing here is this was a massive, you know, uh, value infusion to California and the country as a whole. And that's why they fast tracked. I mean, not only was the California government, you know, uh, ambitious to take control, but the federal government took control and they fast tracked California to become a state, because usually you had to become a territory first and then a state. I went into all that when I looked at the birth chart of California, but um, yeah, they were just like, no, you're a state now. We're And the other thing that's like, ironic and I don't know, sort of sad for Mexico is that actually January 24th, 1848, when the gold was found, technically the land was still part of Mexico. And only like, I think it was a few weeks later, there was a treaty that was signed and Mexico gave away the land because they thought it's like this outpost where there's just a few hundred or thousand people nobody cares about. Mexico gave away this land to the United States, I mean, for free. And then look at this, the United States like picks up 750,000 pounds of gold. I mean, that's crazy. I was like, wow, Mexico. Whew, that's unfortunate. Yeah. So anyway, a pretty wild story. But yeah, let's see what else we have. I think I have more here. Hold on. Okay, so if we focus in on finances here, again, what kind of things are we seeing? Well, again, the second lord is a swa Saturn. So this is strong, long-lasting physical effects, but with difficulties. This is like literally land and property. That's where the real, value came from. I mean, yeah, there was gold for sure, but property claims, having the ability to work on any property, that's really where the real value was over time. Um, the thing that was at this Saturn was, again, aspecting the eighth house here and the 11th house as well. So there were some, how would I say, like, delays, obstacles regarding other people's money and income. So it wasn't, um, again, what seemed like the real winners here was this, I would say, landowners, not the people who just sort of, barged in and were looking for gold, but people who actually own land, and also the merchants who were selling supplies. That's what I'm seeing here. Then the eighth house here, the Lord is Sun. And what's interesting is there's a parivartan exchange of stars with moon, because moon is in the star of sun and sun is in the star of moon. So that makes sun stronger than it actually looks. The sun doesn't look super strong in this chart, frankly, but it's stronger that way. And so the eighth house of deep psychology, which is some sort of forbearance, mental, emotional forbearance, even though there's still some challenges with Saturn on eighth house. There was still enough people who persevered long enough that this even endured this long, 6 or 7 years. Um, there's strength here. That's going to bring more strength to the eighth house of other people's money, which again was, I think, the merchants and the landowners more than the prospectors. Um, Also, history is involved here with difficulties. Also, this is like a, leadership and governments are, important here, as well as the imagination, I would say. So, just the thought of, I mean, it's kind of a romantic notion, you just have this thought, oh, I'm going to travel to another country and gather gold and create my fortune or empire or, whatever. And some of that came true for some people. So yeah. And then the 11th house here, we have a Swam Mars as the Lord. Um, And again, the Swam Mars is in the fourth house. So again, land and property. That's where the real strength was. And people who are kind of more steady here, because Saturn and Mars are both on the 11th house. So these are people who are more like, long-term construction engineer types. These are the ones you really want out at the end rather than the, you know, go out on your own in the field and try to find some flexor nuggets, gold flexor nuggets or whatever. Um, a lot of innovation, a lot of competition. Again, leadership here, strong groups here. Um, Also, I was looking, the Mahadasha, so the Dasha period is a planetary period. And during certain planetary periods, some planets are more influential or stronger or more active than others. You can think about it that way. And from this chart, because Moon was in a star of Sun almost all day, we were basically running, this chart was running the Sun the first 6 years. And the sun period is 6 years long, because I was thinking, like, why would you, kind of like the tulip chart, I was like, why did the tulip mania only last a few months? I was like, there must be some fast moving planet that's important here. And again, that's Mercury. It went retrograde, so that fits pretty well with the Mercury picture. And here I was like 6 or 7 years, I was like, that's either Sun is the shortest Dasha period, that's 6 years. Mars and Ketu are not far behind with 7 years. And since Moon was in Sun almost all day, um yeah, Sun ran 6 years, which is about the length of this gold rush period. Which is that, I mean, that's pretty wild that showed up in this chart. So anyway, if you compare this chart with the tulip chart again, just to compare and contrast a little bit, there you can see there's a greater financial picture and gains that are long lasting in this chart compared to the tulip chart. So anyway, so that's the gold rush story. So let's move on to what maybe if we can apply any of this, we'll see with AI. Okay, so let's look at AI stuff now. Okay, so again, the time point I used to draw a chart or cast a chart was November 30th, 2022. This was when OpenAI publicly or made ChatGPT, that AI chat box, available to the public for the first time. And they were based in San Francisco, California at the time. So this is a sun chart for them in this moment in time, or this day in time. So again, before I dove into analysis for this chart, I was looking at trying to see if there were any similarities between this chart and the tulips chart, and then this chart and the gold chart. So just to see if there were any similarities. So with the tulip chart, this is the same rising sign, so Scorpio. This is again mostly emotional type of um, general energy for this moment in time, and it's fixed. So it's like emotions that don't change. Not a fickle type of feeling about things here. There's also Sun conjunct Mercury that gives a Buddha-Ditya Yoga, again, that intelligence combination. Saturn is Swa in the third house, and that's similar to when the tulip bubble burst. And again, this could be more of a controlling, methodical actions versus like a Mars in the third house, which we saw was when, the tulip bubble really started blowing up, and prices going wild there. So this is going to be, methodical, long term, slow, calculated actions here. Mars is on the 10th house by aspect. This is going to be innovation of work, action, reputation. We do have a Jupiter-Venus combination through aspect in the Lugna here, which will bring enthusiasm, expansion, advice, socializing, and that kind of thing. And the nakshatras, there were only two that were similar. One was Bharani, so again, the birth or death or life cycle energy, and then Jesta, protection again. So those things were similar to the tulip chart. Let's look at the similarities between ChatGPT and gold now. Okay, so similar to the gold chart. Again, Sun and Mercury conjunct. Again, that's not always such a big deal because Mercury is always close to the Sun, but only 30 to 50% of the time. So that's still something. Again, intelligence calculation. Mars is on the 10th and 4th houses because Mars is in Parivartan exchange with Venus. So initiatives on the ground, work, reputation. Mars and Venus combination, again, competition for luxury goods and arts. This could also be design. Mars and Sun in the 7th house, again, partners, competition, president, CEO energy. So that really strong Mars energy, leadership energy. The other thing is with the Parivartana with Mars and Venus, that means Mars is going to be on more houses than it normally is. Usually Mars is on 4 houses. And 1, 2, 3, 4. With the Parivartana, there are 2 extra houses. So Mars is on half of the chart here. It's a pioneering, inventive, uh, rebellious action planet. So yeah, and then nakshatras here, there were a few. So Bharani was the same, Jesta was the same, Shatabisha, so difficulties, Uttaradrapada, overcoming, past endings and stuff like that. So again, this Bharani Jesta energy seems, at least that's common for all 3 of them, but there's a little bit more in common with the gold chart than the tulips chart. But again, I just wanted to see if there were similarities first before I dove in. So let's see what we do see now. Okay, so again, the Lugna here is Scorpio, Vrishika, fixed water sign, consistent emotions. Also, Scorpios are all about deep transformation, so that's true for AI. The Sun is in Anuradha Nakshatra, so that's victory through alliance. That's a lot different than like a Vishaka energy with a victory at all costs. And then we have some exaggerated planets here. So Venus, Sun is with Venus and Mercury. They're both combus, meaning you won't see outer manifestations. And Venus is like social grace and creativity, especially visual creativity. And Mercury's like ideas and thoughts. So you can't see either one. So if this was a person, this is somebody you couldn't really know what they were thinking or feeling at any given time. It's like a poker face type, you know. And then the thing is, Venus and Mercury just got a planetary war. You can see they're pretty close to each other in degree there. So, Venus represents again heart. Mercury represents head. So this is like head versus heart. Maybe ideas versus emotions. You know, that kind of thing. So there's some inner turbulence here going on. Also, Venus and Mercury at war, that destabilizes the houses they own, which is the seventh house of partnerships, the eighth house of other people's money, deep psychology, the 11th house of clubs, group society, and the 12th house of losses and expenditures. So, and again, just knowing a little bit about AI, those things are all kind of hot topics, right, in terms of AI development over time. So also Venus is bhavam. So Venus is the lord of the seventh house, and it's gone 7 houses away. So this is going to be one partnership after another. But the partnerships you can see, these are going to be with other leaders. So other president CEO types, like heads of businesses and heads of enterprise. So that's going to be the partnership alliance going on here. Venus and Mercury are both in Jesa, so protecting ideas, creative ideas, protecting, you know, business ideas, protecting decisions, you know, all this kind of stuff. And Mercury again, it's combusts, and you know, in this protective energy, and it's the lord of 2 money houses, the 8th house of other people's money, and the 6th, or the 11th house of income. So this is income you can't really see. Like, so there's some value here because Mercury's in Jesta again. Remember, Mercury was in Jesta in the Tulip chart. It wasn't combust, so you could actually see, you know, some money. But Mercury is combust, and it's been at war, just got out of war. And again, there's this protection, you know, kind of energy to it. So this is like, you know, kind of veiling the creativity here. The design, and also like Mars is aspecting in here. When you get Mars and Mercury together, you can get computers. Yeah. So, and then Mars is in Mrigashirsha nakshatra. Mrigashirsha is symbolized by a deer. So Mars is, you know, again, an innovative, pioneering energy. And you know, if you think about deer, they wander through the forest or whatever. And Mrigashirsha can be related to marketing. So this is potentially fairly aggressive marketing going on here, and marketing to president CEOs. Like that's, I think, their real target market here. Although we'll talk about it, you know, I think the problem is that, you know, it might work selling the idea of AI to higher ups, but you know, then actually having it implemented on the ground floor with, you know, Joe Schmo, you know, that's, I think, the sticking point here, part of the sticking point, at least what I can see in the chart here. So, let's see, and then also aspected by Swa, Karkabhavanasha, Jupiter, and Uttarabhadrapada. So, Jupiter, again, kind of like the Jupiter-Venus energy in the 11th house of the Tulip chart. There's like the socializing stuff going on. And we've got more here. Like I mentioned, we have 3 natural benefics together. This is kind of like a party kind of energy or socializing type of energy in a way. A lot of talking, a lot of news, a lot of like creative ideas flowing back and forth. Also, this Venus, Mercury, Jupiter create what's called Saraswati yoga, which Saraswati is the goddess of arts, creativity, and education as well. So in the beginning, this is like a, you know, slow development kind of creative learning project here, which is kind of weird. Because now, like, you know, this is only a few years ago. Because now, today, I think, you know, the general population vibe on AI is changing. I mean, some people love it, but I think the people who love it are like the, you know, kind of higher up business people and stuff like that. And that's kind of what's strong here. What's also kind of weird about this chart is Rahu and Ketu, which are the planets symbolizing like the internet and technology, are in negative houses. So there's problems with technology here. And sixth house is like acute problems, and the 12th house is like losses and expenditures. And again, that's how I started this whole talk was, even in the middle of when I was putting the slide deck together, the news was coming out that, are the, expenditures are going astronomically high for these AI companies, and can they turn a profit? And now, so, the Rahu and Ketu, again, technology problems, losses, expenditures, but also, Rahu and Ketu are hidden unexpected. These are hidden unexpected problems, hidden unexpected costs, and you can see that in this chart here. So yeah, and then Jupiter Karko Bhavanasha, Jupiter represents children, and it's in the fifth house of children. This could be problems with children, and again, like I think it was just France, just curtailed, you know, um, use of child. I don't know if it's internet or AI and education or something like that. So, but it was kind of along these lines of like, how is this affecting children? And I know like, or how is this even like, this, because we have Saturn aspecting this Jupiter here, this Swa Saturn aspecting this Swa Jupiter. This Swa Saturn is going to really slow down Jupiter here. Jupiter's enthusiasm, education, all this kind of stuff. So Jupiter in the fifth house is good for, again, advice, not so great for children. But then when you have Saturn on it, there's like this enthusiasm that's available here. It's like realities of Saturn, because Saturn is a tangible physical planet, is like the physical realities of implementing this are like dampening the natural enthusiasm that's a part of this offering of ChatGPT on this day. So yeah. So the other thing is that like I think the motives of this company or this action to share ChatGPT with the public and the partners who are presidents and CEOs and things like that, they're opposites. And there's a tension here because of this parivartana. Like there's a lot of going back and forth between maybe OpenAI or ChatGPT or the AI. Let's just call it AI in general, okay? Because again, we're just using this as like a marker for when AI really went, ballistic all of a sudden in the last few years. But there's this tension. It's not so easy breezy, even though there are these like natural benefics on the lugna, which seems great, but you also have Mars and Sun here. So the creativity and the enthusiasm is mostly at higher levels of businesses here. And there's still some inner conflict, this Venus and Mercury just out of war. And then the moon isn't even in this picture. The moon represents public, and that's part of the problem. In terms of like, uh, are like, is the general public on board with all this? And I don't think they are, because moon is in Shatabisha, that 100 healers hard to fix and diagnose and treat type of energy. So this is not sitting well with the public. Also, this massive Saturn swan, the third house, this is like delays, obstacles, physical obstacles, delays, doubts, fears of neighborhoods. And this could literally be the data centers that people are starting to, like they just a week or two ago, they had a protest across the United States in like 40 something cities with people objecting to building of data centers that support all this AI development. And New York just passed a law basically stopping the development of data centers in the state for the next year. So that's also slowing down like this potential enthusiasm that's here. And also this enthusiasm that's also like the growth of this, you know. So you can see there's like a mixed energy here. Um Jupiter's in Uttar, so this is like publishing something to overcome like a past destructive mood or move or action or something. And I was looking up the timing. So Anthropic, which I think at this point is seen as like a competitor to OpenAI and was founded by employees of OpenAI who put out ChatGPT. And they like kind of have a different MO and, brand and all this kind of stuff. But basically, I was wondering when Anthropic was founded, and it was founded in 2001. So maybe that was one, and I'm guessing there are more like big hits to this company where they felt like they felt like if they put their work out first, that'll create some traction for them, in terms of the whole milieu and marketplace, and maybe that did work maybe for a while, but then I think things kind of changed in the last year or so because they've been vying for contracts like with the government and the Department of Defense and all this kind of stuff. So they seem like they're in competition with each other now. But there's a lot of direct interaction here. Attention. Uh, uh, but there's a lot of strength at the top because again, Mars is aspecting its own house right at the top here. So there's strength and resilience, but there's this inner conflict. There's a slowing down of, again, reality hits the road, or was it the rubber hits the road, where it's like, okay, how do we make this work? It all sounds like a great idea, but how does it work in the real world? I think that's part of the pushback too. Also the partners. While the lugna here is deeply emotional. So this is people like probably the people developing this are like really just into it. Just really like hardcore like tech people who like love it and love to innovate and like they're just into the whole ideas and seeing what they could do. But these president CEO partners are much more practical because they're in Taurus and they're fixed. They are both, so one side is fixed in terms of their emotions and the other side is fixed in terms of the practical output and results that they're looking for to make it worth their while. There is a successful alliance, so I think that's part of why things have blown up as much as they have so far. Um, yeah, so publishing enthusiasm growth. The other thing is if this was a person, so just to give you like if this is a person, this is somebody who would be like ADHD. Like their mind would be all over the place, their actions would be all over the place. They'd be creative and innovative, but again, there's not a lot of like I would say steadiness here, you know. Especially with Mars being so strong, Sun being so strong, like it's a lot of transformational energy, but is there any staying power? I guess I would wonder about that. The other thing is that it's also interesting because like Rahu and Ketu are not with Mars and Mercury, which usually those three together give like a internet technology. So Rahu and Ketu are not in the middle here. Also, Saturn is not here, and Saturn and Mars don't line up here. And when you get Saturn and Mars together, that's about engineering. So it's just interesting. Like I was like kind of surprised, like um, that again, this looked like a really slow but steady educational creative project initially that was innovative, but yeah, I think also has issues here. And again, even the Saturn aspecting Jupiter, this is going to structurally change how education's done. Besides, change the kids. And, if they're not actual kids, this could be future generations, you know. Yeah, and then this Mars aspecting the 10th house, I mean, that's going to change work, the way work is done. So, yeah, not quite what I expected, but okay, interesting. We'll start here. Okay, so yeah, that was just a kind of a general overpass of the chart. Let's look at the other houses and see if there's anything else that stands out. So the second house, the Lord, is Jupiter, which is Swa, so that's strong, which again, that's one of the money houses. The only thing is you have this massive Saturn Swa Saturn aspecting it, and Jupiter's in a star of Saturn as well. So Jupiter's dominated by Saturn, which again delays, obstacles, all that. The other thing is Jupiter can represent the stock market, and since it's Lord of the second house, it's related. The second house is related to movable assets, such as a large portfolio. So there might be indications here that again, stock wise, things may there's some strength here regarding that. The only thing is Saturn is going to be delays and obstacles, and then Mars is aspecting the second house, and Mars is like an erratic kind of energy. So I think there might be, again, if you try, it depends. Like if you ever, most tech stocks though, like it's so volatile. Like one day they're high, one day they're kind of like that news I shared with you. Like, what was it? Was it Tesla? Was that the company that lost 17% in one day? Again, it's sort of like there's that kind of activity going on generally with stock market tech stocks, but in this chart as well. It's not, even though Jupiter's strong, it's a lord of the second house, it's not without issue because you have this massive Saturn on it and Mars, natural malefic on the second house. So, yeah. And then again, this is a Scorpio rising, so the second house, eighth house, 11th houses, all the money houses are dual. So, again, sort of flip the coin type of energy, to some extent. Um, and then we've got, Jupiter, karako, bhava, nashaya. I mentioned Jupiter in the fifth house gives problems with kids, children. That's an Uttarashada. No, wait. Uttarashada. Uttarabhadrapada. Sorry, I have to change it. So Jupiter's an Uttarabhadrapada, so overcoming difficulty. So probably right before ChatGPT was provided to the public, there were some problems that they were trying to overcome, maybe by making this public. Because I think it was a surprise for people. And then we have retrograde Mars and Mrigashirsha. So again, the second house is speech. So this could be like pretty aggressive speech, pretty aggressive marketing going on here. There's some strength here, overcoming past endings, obstacles, delays, even breakdowns. Financial advice regarding assets, there could be that going on, like, people enthusiastically encouraging people to invest, um, which is true. That's happened. I don't know if it's happened with public stocks, but I think certain people, like investors, have gotten on board. But again, this is going to be slower to develop. It's not going to be a straight shot. It's not going to be a rocket. Yeah. So, but we've got there's some disruptive issues here. Again, the neighbors I talked about, uh, data centers, fighting competition. Yeah, so the second house is also inner circle, so there's fighting and competition going on there. Um, reviewing actions since Mars is retrograde. It's like reviewing actions. Like, did we, market this property properly? Did we create a product that's market ready? Those sorts of things are being reviewed. In the third house here, we've got a Swa, Saturn, and Dhanishta, which is symbolized by a drum. So this is again a slow, steady rhythm. This could be disruptions to physical disruptions or disruptions to physical rhythms with home and neighbors, because Saturn's also the lord of the fourth house of home. Again, I think this is like data centers, that's what I keep seeing here. Then the fourth house here, the lord is a Swa, Saturn. We've got Mars in Shatabisha and or Purvabhadrapada. Either way, it's not really great news because they're both pretty hardcore nakshatra. Shatabisha is translated as 100 healer, so it's things that are hard to fix, heal, protect even. And then Purvabhadrapada is the front legs of a funeral pyre, so that's just full-on destruction happening. Potentially, which is not great either. And that's the moon, which is the emotional mind, and mom, Also, moon has digbal here, directional strength. So the moon is and it's also karka bhava nasha. So, problems with land, problems with home. Yeah, it's not great energy here for the moon in this part of the sky. Public emotional difficulties. The other thing is the position of Saturn and Moon creates what we call a sadhisati. So this is, potentially a 7.5 year period where the main commonality with sadhisati is there's a loss of support, like major support. And so with Saturn, rolling through the natal moon here, well, Saturn's almost at the end of Capricorn, so this might be more like 5 or 6 years of trouble in the nascent years of this. So, and it just developed in 22. So, and Saturn is currently in Pisces, where Jupiter is in this chart, and Saturn won't move out of Pisces until February 2028. So, ChatGPT, this moment for AI and ChatGPT and probably OpenAI, the formative years are not easy here. And that Sadhisati won't be over until February 2028. So we've got another almost 2 years with that going on, or this does. Um, yeah, so also, what else do we have? The fifth house here, the fifth house lord is Karko Bhavanasha Jupiter, aspected by this massive Saturn and a star of Saturn. These are the children's slow rhythms, optimism. And again, like the problems with rolling this out into reality, this is something that was developed by a bunch of tech people in a lab or something. And, that doesn't always translate well with all of us, non-techie people. So how to bridge that gap. I think that's part of the issue here. Oh, the other thing I didn't mention is that massive Saturn on Jupiter. That could also be like the slowing down in terms of laws, like even the law with New York, putting a hold on development of data centers for next year. That's going to slow down how fast this is adopted. But anyway, more of the chart here. So the sixth house lord is Mars. And Rahu is there. And Rahu can be like, again, unusual ambition, but it's in the sixth house of acute problems. It's also the sixth house's enemies. And Rahu can symbolize like technology. So this is unusual ambition, tech partners emerging. But this could even be the technology itself, like even, what was it yesterday, I think, OpenAI, I don't know if it was ChatGPT or some other product it had. Basically, it went rogue, quote unquote rogue, and like jumped out of like human control and did some sort of cyber attack or something like that. So that's like the technology being an enemy here in this chart. And you have Rahu in the sixth house of enemies and Ketu in the 12th house of hidden enemies. So, that's a little like concerning, frankly, in this chart. Um, so then the seventh house here, the Lord is a combust, war, Mars, aspecting its own sign, which would make it Karka Bhavanasha. Venus in the seventh house gives a with relationships. And then Mars aspecting its own sign, blah blah, with Sun, Mercury. So yeah, there's issue with relations, unseen thoughts and feelings, like I mentioned, inner conflict, hidden hurt, computer design, protection. I would also say cybersecurity, um, because again, this Venus and Mercury are in this protection Jesta energy. So that might also be like protecting its creative ideas, because again, like at some point, you have these mechanisms, these AI, platforms and modules or whatever, and they can do their own vibe code, whatever coding and stuff like that. So it's like, how would you even protect? And that's happened. Even like Anthropic, at one point, well, it wasn't not too long ago. I think like what was it? Trying to remember the details. I think the code for one of their was it the code for one of their products like was just openly displayed on the internet for like anybody to see. So it like gave, competition or, misanthropes a chance to, detect their vulnerabilities and attack their systems or whatever. I don't know. I mean, it's like it's a lot of wild stuff. It's hard to kind of keep track of, if you're not on the inside of all this stuff. So, um, but yeah, there's like again, this isn't even though again, if you just look at the planets, it looks pretty good, like a lot of leadership of good energy. When you dig into it more, you can see that there's holes and leaks and, you know, delays and obstacles and stuff. Then the eighth house here, the Lord is this combust Mercury. It's in its own star, which is good. It's also um, hold on, aspect to Mars. I gotta check that out. But this Mercury, basically, this Mercury is drawing in energy from the eighth house of other people's money, as well as the sixth house of income. So originally, this started off as a nonprofit company, but I don't know if it was before this or after this when they decided to create a profit track as well. But again, I'm not sure that it's really profitable yet. But they keep taking out different rounds of funding from like venture capitalists and stuff like that. So, yeah, there's a lot of money involved, even at the top here in terms of management. So, but there's again this like, oh, that's what it is. The aspect is coming from Mars. Yes, that's true. I was like, wait, did I make a mistake? No, there's an aspect coming from Mars in the eighth house because of the parivartan between Mars and Venus. So yeah, so this Mars and Mrigashirsha retrograde, this is in the eighth house of deep psychology. So this is again fairly aggressive actions, fairly aggressive mindset here. Um, yeah, then the ninth house here, the Lord is Moon, which we already know is in Shatabisha for Vadrapada, so that's problematic. And then you have a mixed energy. You've got Saturn and Jupiter both on the ninth house of authority, organization, government. So again, it's like a Ferris wheel. Sometimes like you got slow energy, sometimes you've got positive, optimistic energy. It's like it goes back and forth. So yeah, that's pretty wild actually. And that's the management of OpenAI, management of AI generally, management of governments, all the stacked layers of authority involved here. So yeah, that's interesting. Okay, then the last part of the slides, or last part of the chart. So the 10th house here, the 10th house lord is Sun, aspected by Mars and Moon. Again, aggressively seeking high levels of innovation, imagination, disruption of work. I mean, it's all there. Then the 11th house of the Lord is this combust war Mercury aspected by Jupiter. So this is like a mix of optimism regarding income and group. There's a slowness here. There's also unseen, like, like income. So like, I'm just wondering if there's any sort of tangible payouts here. I don't know how that works, like with the venture capitalists, like supporting, different, right, huge levels of funding for these organizations. But it's like, if everything crashed and burned, like, do they have anything to really sell? Like to come up with some cash to pay off their debts? Like, that's what I was wondering. And that's what it seems like here. It's like, all the money is, all the eighth house money, other people's money, and the profit money, the income money, is going to self. So it's like, where does the profit come in? Like, especially if Mercury's combust, like so yeah, I'm not really sure how that works um in the real world for these companies, but it's there. Then the 12th house lord is combust warm Venus. K2 is there in Swati. This is like a unusual, newborn, fragile kind of energy with K2. Again, that could be destruction, separation, poison, even. It's also aspected by Saturn. So you have two separation planets in the 12th house. Saturn's really strong. Saturn represents land. And K2 is there. I mean, this could be like emerging hidden tech enemies, like AI losing human control. This could be physical costs, land costs. This could be land poisoning, environmental destruction. This is also in Libra happening, so unstable markets. Yeah, I'm just seeing like a lot of potential physical, but also like strange, unusual, unforeseen fallout, like, almost like collateral damage kind of energy here. And then any sort of growth that happens it's going to be slower than anticipated because of this massive Saturn on Jupiter. Again, just reality frictions. Like all this is like, pie in the sky, high level thinking, but how does this actually work in the real world and roll out in the real world is a whole another issue. And there's clearly going to be like impact on future generations here. So I mentioned the star Swati Yoga indicating education and creativity in this chart. Also Kalasarpa Yoga again, so ambition and usual energy. There's also a Hamsa Yoga with Jupiter in its own sign in the 5th house. That's a Panchamahapurush Yoga. That'll bring like education and publishing as well. So again, like at first glance, I wasn't really seeing like tech takeover. If anything, there's like issues with tech and yeah, there's leadership here, but more along the lines of creativity and publication and stuff like that. So that kind of threw me. And there is some strength with Jupiter and Mercury, the lords of the second, eighth, and 11th houses, but there are also a lot of issues as well. So yeah, I think it's hard to discern. Let's keep looking though, and see if we can find anything else here. Okay, so what's some of the stuff that may affect finances coming up or is affecting finance? Well, first of all, the ChatGPT chart still has a sati sati going on until February 2028. So that's still going to bring, like when somebody goes through sati sati, they typically feel like they're working, 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 and not getting very far. Okay. So that's part of what's going on here for this chart until February 2020. So that's one thing that's going to hold things back. Okay. The other thing is that, let's see, the second house lord is Jupiter. Okay. Which is strong because it's in its own sign, but it has this massive swa Saturn aspecting it. This is going to delay gains, delay publishing, delay obstacles, delay speech, advice, assets, all the things related to Jupiter in this chart. Okay. And since Jupiter is the lord of the second house of oral communication and it's Swa, this may be some like, verbal hype going on in inner circles. Okay. But then the thing is with this massive Saturn, it's going to like slow that rollout down. So it's like, will it live up to the hype? There will be hype, but will it live up to the hype? Or will there be a delay in realizing the hype in the real world? That may be true in this chart. That's what I'm seeing. Then 8th and 11th house lords is a combust swa by star, combust war Mercury. I mean, that's a lot of exaggerated Mercury that you don't see. So, and it's a dual planet. So it's like unseen, tangible ideas. The other thing is, again, Mercury, like in that tulip chart, I mean, Mercury's a fast planet. So when Mercury zips around and it's in a strong chart, I mean, strong house for itself or strong sign for itself, it will like, in a few weeks, because usually Mercury's in a house for a few weeks because it moves fast. There might be a few weeks at a time where things go really great and then it dips out and then it's like great again and then there's a few months it's out and then it's so there's going to be a lot of back and forth besides that money houses being dual signs, like two of those three money houses are ruled by Mercury, which is a fast moving planet. So you might get these almost like a extended tulip mania type of thing, where it's like, oh, things might blow up for a few weeks and then it all cools down, and then suddenly it goes reverse and then this and that. So it's going to be back and forth a lot. Yeah, and then also involving finances. So what are the dashas? So the dasha that this chat GPT started in was Rahu, which is in the sixth house of acute problems. And Rahu's like hidden, unexpected problems. So we're in that phase, that energy. And again, this could be like the sixth house is also enemy. So this is like tech enemies, like tech going rogue, which just happened again yesterday. But then the thing is, once we move from the Rahu period to the Jupiter period, things may be better in some ways. Better in terms of maybe the stock market, because again, Jupiter is related to the second house of assets and, again, large portfolios like stock. So in the Jupiter period runs for about 16 years. So the stock market, again, there's going to be slowness because Saturn's on Jupiter. We've got Mars on the second house. Again, there's still going to be volatility. It's going to be slower and more volatile than if Jupiter were just sitting in the second house of Sagittarius by itself, unobstructed. But it's obstructed by Saturn as a planet. It's obstructed by being in Saturn's star. There's slowness, delays, obstacles, fears, doubts, worries, all that stuff. And then Mars aspecting into the second house. That's going to be the, erratic action that Mars brings to anything. And actually, as maybe a counter example, I recently did analyze the birth chart for SpaceX, which is one of these tech companies, and they're actually starting to get into AI more now. They're more of a space engineering company, but they did their IPO. Their natal chart has Mars in its own sign in the second house. And when SpaceX had its IPO, Mars was in the second house, basically recreating its natal Mars. But the thing is, Mars was about to, at that time, Mars was only had like 7 to 10 days before it left that house. So I said, well, you might get kind of a big burst of action here, but then it doesn't look like it's going to last because Mars without like Saturn with it, it's just this really kind of erratic energy. And sort of Sun, because Sun's a constant energy, but it's more fire. So it's going to really it's going to kind of keep Mars going, but it's not going to temper Mars. It's going to make it kind of more fiery, be more of like a push type energy. It might study it a little bit, but there's nothing really like, again, keeping Mars in check here. So anyway, so the Rahu period, is going to be erratic. Jupiter period may be better. That runs for 16 years. But then after Jupiter Dasha is the Saturn Dasha, which runs for 19 years. So during the Saturn Dasha, there's going to be a massive slowdown here in terms of enthusiasm, in terms of optimism, in terms of asset, development. But, that's down the line. So again, I think depending on where people sit in terms of their investments of time, energy, money, whatever, short term, there's still problems. Kind of medium range, after Rahu. And again, I don't exactly know when Rahu shifts to Jupiter. We might be sort of on the verge of that. Like, then there might be more steadiness in terms of at least the stock market. It's not going to change. Well, it might change income. Well, let me see. It might change income actually, because this SWA Jupiter is aspecting the 11th house. So there might be more profits and there might be more like stock, profits as well during the Jupiter period. Again, I don't know exactly when the Jupiter period is because I don't have an exact time for this, but when that happens. But the thing is, right now, Saturn is literally in this house of Jupiter until February 2028. So the Saturn is on Jupiter in the house Jupiter's sitting at. Saturn is aspecting the 11th house of income, and it's also aspecting the second house of stock portfolios. So stock portfolios regarding AI and profits, income, that's going to be a problem until like February 2028. And then a different, so then it sounds like once February 2028 hits, then okay, Sati's over, Saturn moves out away from off of the 11th house and the second house. That sounds really great. The only thing though is Saturn is now going to be in the sixth house where it's debilitated, and it's going to aspect the eighth house of other people's money. So there's going to be a shift there. Also, like funding for this stuff might dry up because again, there's only so much that these VCs I think can like pump into this AI system to get it going. And when Saturn is debilitated in the sixth house here, that means it's on all the negative houses. So the sixth house of acute problems, the eighth house of long-term chronic problems, the 12th house of losses and expenditures, the third house of, again, neighbors, siblings, peers. So, and then Saturn again shifts signs about every 2.5, 3 years. So that's still going to bring problems. You know what I mean? And then after Saturn, and then after that period of 3 years, whatever, what does that bring us up to? Like 2031. Then Saturn is going to be in the seventh house of partnerships, and it's going to aspect the Lugna here, which is itself like, So Saturn's still, even though we're not running Saturn, Saturn's still gonna drag on all these things, over the next few years. So, but again, Jupiter probably is going to be a more optimistic period for investments, stock and creating profit from this. But again, after the Jupiter period, it looks like it's going to cool off and maybe not be so hot of an item anymore. But in the meantime, if you have the wherewithal to, jump in quickly and get things done quickly and, while Mercury's circling around and then, well, whenever we move into the Jupiter period, that would probably be better. But again, it doesn't look like, um, I guess it depends on what you consider to be a bubble. I think that's what it comes down to at this point. Because it doesn't seem, it's not like this manic, crazy, wild ride that was the Tulip mania. And it wasn't the, again, also wild ride that was the gold rush. But uh, again, I don't think it's meeting expectations. So if you call, you know, uh, and I think the expectations are like there is wild enthusiasm from upper level management, but I don't think it trickles down to the, public. So that's attention. And then the realities, physical realities, these are slowing things down. So again, depending on what your expectations are in terms of timelines and like in terms of ROI, return on investment, in that regard, it might be seen as like a bubble. But it's not like the same, it's not like this crazy wild spree, that's the same that was going on with either the tulip mania or the gold rush. So so yeah, I'm not sure if that's helpful, but hopefully that clarifies a little bit in terms of how this is like different, it still may not, again, return on investment. And in that sense, it might seem overvalued because people are expecting more from it. And there's this like some level, again, higher level management is really enthusiastic, but again, they may not get the return if they're the ones kind of buying into this and pushing this and all this kind of stuff because again, it's like these other delays, things are slowing things down. So yeah, let's see what else we have. Okay, so what I have on this slide, on the left, I have the same ChatGPT goes public chart that I've been looking at the last few slides. But on the right here, I have the transit chart. So how are the planets looking like in the sky as of July 23rd, yesterday, 2026? So what I did with the transit chart was I oriented it so that it's Scorpio rising or, Vrishika Lagna, like the ChatGPT chart, so that we're comparing same rising sign charts, okay? So, yeah, hold on a second. Okay, so what's similar in the ChatGPT chart versus the transit chart? Because what's similar will be reinforced at the moment. So what's similar is Mars is in the seventh house in both of these charts. So again, that kind of like, competition, fighting, CEO, and also I would say creative energy. It's the creativity comes in different ways. In the ChatGPT chart, the creativity comes from the Jupiter Venus Mercury combination, which creates a Saraswati yoga, which is the goddess again of creativity. Venus is creative as well, creativity and arts. In the second chart, Moon is there. So we have a Moon Mars combination. Moon is also creativity, but like imagination. And Mars is in Rohini Nakshatra instead of Mrigashirsha. So Rohini Nakshatra is more about like again creativity, productivity, and stuff like that. So in both charts, Mars is on 1, 2, and 10, besides 7. So Mars is in the Lagna and it's like, aspecting its own sign. So there's going to be strength here, resilience here, for the whole identity. Second house is speech, inner circle, assets, and the 10th house is, actions and work. So the same energy there. The only thing is there's not this parivartana exchange with Venus. So Mars is not on the fourth house and it's also not on the eighth house in this transit chart. Also, what's also interesting is Moon. Hold on. No, that's not actually similar, but it's, actually interesting and important. So this Mars is aspecting Moon, which happens to be in Vishaka Nakshatra in the second chart, the transit chart. So that Moon, well, actually, both Mars is on both the creativity planets, Moon, which is the intuitive mind and imagination, Venus, which is like especially like visual arts and things like that. So yeah, Mars is stirring up and disrupting creative arts, I would say. And also emotions, because Moon and Venus are both the emotional planets. So emotional disruption as well as creative disruption. Saturn, let's see, Saturn. Oh, this is also like we have Saturn and Jupiter on the fifth house again. Now in the transit chart, Saturn is sitting in the fifth house and Jupiter's aspecting. So there's still this like Saturn Jupiter combination of the fifth house. So mixed advice, Saturn's the great pessimist, Jupiter's the great optimist, like going back and forth. Jupiter is on all the water signs. So instead of being in Pisces, which is a dual water sign, it's now in Cancer, which is a movable water sign. So Jupiter's going to be amplifying emotions here. So this is going to be a very emotional time with all this. Yeah. Um, and then Mercury is Swa in both charts. So Mercury Swa by star Tara in the first chart, and Mercury Swa by sign in the transit chart here. Now, the thing is, Mercury is Lord again of the eighth house of other people's monies like investments, but also like and loans. But also Mercury's the Lord of the house, 11th house of income. So in the second chart, Mercury swath, so there's some strength, but uh, the strength seems to be coming again from other people's money. I think that's all these like, rounds of VC funding and stuff like that that's going on to fund these big companies and all their expenses that seem to be like spinning out. But the thing is, this Mercury in the eighth house, this is going to draw that income, profit, into the eighth house of chronic deep problems. So the money's not going to self, the money's going to, repay investors and stuff like that. So the money that was potentially coming in in the first chart, the natal chart here for ChatGPT, is not at this moment showing up. Yeah, which we're seeing in the transit chart. So what is kind of new or current in this transit chart that's kind of new or current energy? So Saturn is on the second house and 11th house. So delay in gains, delay in income, delay in groups, like trouble with groups, which we're seeing like those protests I mentioned, protests in 40 different cities across the United States recently. Saturn is aspecting Mars, slowing down actions. It's also aspecting Venus. Oh no, so Saturn's aspecting Mars, slowing down actions, and Mars is aspecting Ketu and Venus. So there's like this chain. So even though it doesn't look like it, there's Saturn and Mars like indirectly on Venus and Ketu. So this is like Venus and so Mars and Ketu is explosive energy. It's also technology, like machines, innovative machines, and also design of innovative machines. So now, like, what's interesting is now you've got Rahu and Ketu in the Kendras here, the center, the four uh, houses in the middle, which is what I sort of expected with the ChatGPT original chart. But Rahu and Ketu are off, in the 6th and 12th houses. I was like, it's weird. So now the orientation is definitely towards making it something disruptive instead of this, like, sort of exuberant, interesting, creative, educational exercise or something. Now there's like a mission with this. Yeah. And it's disrupting work and creativity as well, I would say. Or innovating, disrupting, innovating, two sides of the same coin, I guess. Jupiter is strong because it's in its exaltation sign, but it's weak on two counts. One, it's currently combust. So again, you can't see the assets, because Jupiter is the lord of the second house of assets. The other thing is, what is it? It's combust. The other thing is Jupiter is gone 8 houses away from the second house. So Jupiter's the lord of the second. It's gone 8 houses away. So again, long, deep problems. And that might also be like recently, just in the last couple of weeks, Jupiter's gone combust. And now the sun, you can see sun's going to roll over it in the next few days, making as combust as it could possibly be. And that seems to be in alignment with when we got the news yesterday about, stock, tech stocks are dropping, da 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 da. That might be because sun is rolling across combust Jupiter, and Jupiter is 8 houses away. Yeah, so also sun is karako bhava nasha in this chart instead of moon being moon. So in the first chart you had moon and Jupiter karako bhava nasha, so problem with moms and children. In this chart you have problems with sun, so which represents fathers and authority and bosses. So yeah, and the sun and Jupiter are both in Pusha Nakshatra, which is a very nurturing energy. So there can be problems with, again, heads of companies and organizations paid for this AI, implemented this AI, nurturing the AI, but they're not seeing the returns. They're not seeing the gains from the AI. Yeah. Also, what is it? Saturn is Karko Bhavan. Oh no, Saturn is Bhavat Bhavam. So Saturn's the third lord going 3 houses away. Jupiter is also Bhavat Bhavam. Jupiter's the fifth lord going 5 houses away. So Saturn again represents peers, a lot of peers and neighbors involved, a lot of kids. So again, these are kind of the sticking points in terms of the rollout of some of the stuff. Neighbors protesting development of AI centers, and also like educational facilities. Like what was it? University of Chicago. Their dean recently announced that they're not allowing AI in their first year law program. So first year of their law program, law degree. So again, schools are coming down on this, and neighbors are, neighbor communities are coming down on this in various ways. So again, and then what else do we have here? K2 and Mars on both Venus and Moon. Again, this could be emotional outbursts. I think people are getting frustrated here. Again, again, I think because of their expectations, like they thought this was going to be that, new hot commodity and blow up fast, like maybe the tulip mania or gold rush or something, but it's got a different energy and kind of underlying mechanism here. It's not like those two. Then let's see, Mercury in the eighth house, I mentioned that. So again, there's going to be a drain, chronic issues, and there's a drain of profit going to other people's money, like paying back investors and stuff. So yeah, so again, the shift here from the first chart on the left to the second chart is like some sort of creative educational enterprise to disruptive technology and arts and even emotion, I would say, on the second chart. So that's why I think people are concerned and, anxious about all this. On some level, that's part of what's going on. Okay, so on this side, getting back to that original idea I mentioned about whenever we're looking at something in terms of its outcomes, like we always want to look at 3 points. We want to, in terms of Vedic astrology, or actually, I don't know, I assume in Western astrology, but I don't know how that works. I'm not an expert in Western astrology, but in terms of Vedic astrology, we always want to look at kala, which is time, which is mostly what we've been looking at. And then kshetra, which is a field, and that's what we're going to look at on this slide. And then the mitra, which are individuals, which we haven't covered. Um, so at least not many. Like I did look at Elon Musk chart. His chart is in my YouTube channel, and then Jeff Bezos, SpaceX, Amazon. So a few companies, but not necessarily hardcore AI companies or individual. Well, maybe Elon Musk, I guess, would be a pretty hardcore AI guy. And then Jeff Bezos is becoming a hardcore AI guy, I guess. So maybe Elon Musk, you might look at his chart if you're interested in at least one of the individuals involved in all this. But um, so I have here 3 different charts for 3 different fields that I seem like can influence how things go for not just ChatGPT, but AI as an industry as a whole. And so from left to right, I have the sun chart for San Francisco. Now, this was again the headquarters for ChatGPT, OpenAI when they released ChatGPT. Then the middle chart here may seem unrelated, but I don't think it is. This is a sun chart for San Jose, California, which was the first capital of California, but also, this is just a stone's throw away from San Francisco. And this is like where a lot of the tech happens, Silicon Valley, where a lot of the tech is developed. Also, a lot of the funding, like VC funding, happens for AI tech. So I think that's important. And then the last chart here is the birth chart for the United States. So let's see what we see. And so, but again, we'll see here that what's interesting, I mean, not to get to the punchline too early here, but all 3 of these charts are actually, they look different, but they're actually similar in deep ways. So if we look at the first chart, so San Francisco, this is San Francisco was incorporated 15th of April, 1850, which again was about a year and a half after the gold rush started. See, that got pushed through. And then San Jose, that was a few weeks before. That was 27th of March, 1850. So these 2 towns, like, and they got incorporated before the state of California did, which is like wild. That's how fast they were like pushing things through. And then the USA chart, which is also interesting because it's a Scorpio Lugna, like the ChatGPT chart. So they're in cahoots, they're in sync on some level. It was 4th of July, 1776 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 17:10 p.m. was the time there. So that one's exact. The other 2 are sun charts, okay? Okay, so first thing I noticed, each of these charts, okay, the San Francisco chart, we have a Saturn return going on currently. Okay, that will bring complete transformation, structural transformation. Okay, in the San Jose chart, we also have Saturn return right in the Lugna, massive identity overhaul, which is like Silicon Valley blowing up right now with all this AI stuff. It's like, like on overload, like craziness right now from everything I read in here. Okay. And then for even the USA chart, which is like what, 100 years before, 75 years before. Saturn is on Pisces. This is a half Saturn return. So you have Saturn on like Pisces Virgo axis on all three of these charts. That alone blew me away. So, okay, so that's a lot. Okay, but again, San Francisco soon, especially once Saturn goes into whatever Aries in February 2028, that's going to be a massive restructuring of San Francisco. That's going to change things up for in some, different ways for OpenAI, ChatGPT, AI, generally speaking, right? All those levels. San Jose, I mean, right now there's a restructuring, but then when Saturn goes into Aries in the second house, that's assets. And we've seen Saturn in the second house twice already. That's going to aspect the eighth house of other people's money. It's also going to aspect the 11th house of income. Delays, obstacles. So there's going to be a financial turndown, looks like, heading San Jose's way come February 2028 for at least 3 years. And then for the United States, let's see, Saturn is so it's just like ChatGPT chart. So Saturn, once February 28th, 2028 rolls around, Saturn's going to be in the sixth house of enemies, debilitated, aspecting the eighth house, all the negative houses. So that's going to stir up a lot of problems for the United States. So especially once Saturn shifts signs, even though like technically ChatGPT, that chart will be out of Sati, which will be helpful. You can see all three of these field levels are going to bring issues to ChatGPT AI. Yeah. So as if that wasn't enough, we have more. So look at where Rahu and Ketu are. Okay. In all three of these charts, Rahu and Ketu are in the same signs. We've got Rahu in Cancer, and we've got Ketu in Capricorn. All three charts. And what's happening is actually December 5th, 2026, in a few months, Rahu and Ketu are recreating the natal position of Rahu and Ketu in all three charts. I mean, okay. So the Saturn thing blew me away. Then the Rahu Ketu return was like whatever was left of my brain was like just vaporized. Okay. So basically, three long-term, slow planets are going to, you know, shift and change things dramatically, like on all levels, like San Francisco, San Jose, which is basically, I kind of see San Jose as like the factory. Okay. Like even though the San Francisco is the sort of headquarters, I kind of see San Jose as a factory of funding as well as technology. And then the United States as well. Like with these two things, the Saturn returns and the Rahu Ketu returns basically simultaneously. They will be simultaneously for a while. We're talking about long-term major unusual restructuring, like restructuring you can't anticipate or imagine. So you've got this on three levels of the field, three different playing fields that this is happening simultaneously. I mean, that's like outrageous. That's almost like when I looked at, that's the other thing that blew me away relatively recently, is when I looked at the chart of Iran back in the spring when the eclipses were going on. And what was it? Israel and the US bombed Iran simultaneously, and that was like wild, kind of out of the blue. And when I looked at the three putras, actually the three individuals, so I looked at the President Trump's chart, and then Khomeini's chart, the head of Iran, and then what's this? Khomeini was the head of Iran, and then the head of Israel, Netanyahu. All three of them were born on eclipses, and all three of their eclipses were being activated simultaneously. It's like that kind of energy here. I was like, whoa, like, so is it a coincidence? Not really. This is what we would call drid karma. I mean, this is like fixed karma. Like there's certain, you know, as a city of San Francisco, as a city of San Jose, as an underlying, you know, energy of the United States, there's deep, long-term, fundamental, strange, unusual, unanticipated changes going on and will be going on for a while here. And again, that's part of why AI is popping up, but it's also going to affect, AI in terms of, especially once Saturn moves into Aries. That's kind of like, all of us are going to be like feeling that one, you know. So yeah, all right, but there's a little bit more. So let me just finish up here since I went through it. See, it's not just the rabbit hole; it was like the whole underground rabbit village I explored in this. Okay, so what's similar with the San Francisco chart and the ChatGPT chart? Well, look, we have this. Look at the Sun, Venus, Mercury. It's like in the top here, and then Jupiter aspecting from the fifth house. I mean, that's kind of wild. So we have a Mercury, Sun, Venus, Jupiter combination. So again, that's like creativity and arts, and that's kind of San Francisco. I mean, San Francisco's like, they have like I used to live in that area. I love it. It's like, old hippies and creativity, and they hate Ashbury. I love that stuff. But it's like, creativity and education, another Saraswati yoga, like that's going on. So that's similar to the Chat GPT chart. And then in the, let's see, San Jose chart, what's similar? Well, they're natural malefics. Look, we've got Mars on Moon and Sun and Saturn on Venus and Moon. We've got natural malefics on Venus and Moon. There's a lot of emotional turbulence and, stuff going on here. A lot of emotional worries and anxieties and all this. That's similar. Let's see, 2, 8, 11. The thing that's different here, this is almost like the transit chart, though, like where the transit chart I just went through for what was it, July 23rd, yesterday, where now you have Moon and Venus in the Kendras, and you have Mars, and instead of Rahu Ketu, you have Sun and Saturn. But it's kind of similar energy. Like again, all these natural malefics and two emotional planets in the Kendras, like all this like physical change and stuff is like disturbing people emotionally. And then the lords of the second house, eighth house, and 11th house, they're in the Kendras here. So the second house is Mars. That lord is Mars. The lord of the eighth house is Venus. The lord of the, 11th house is Saturn. And those are all in the center here. So this is like finance central. Yeah. I mean, again, like I said, San Jose is kind of the financial center for funding all this tech. And then for the USA chart, again, Scorpio Lugna. So that's going to compound the effects. So basically, the Chat GPT chart and the United States chart are going to be in sync, experiencing the same thing simultaneously. But look, what you have in the eighth house here, you have Sun and Mars, the two leadership planets with Venus and Jupiter. Kind of like in the Chat GPT chart, you had Sun, Venus aspected by Jupiter and Mars. So you have that conglomeration. So you basically have the two leadership planets and the two advisory planets in the eighth house here. So it's in a different compartment, but like in a different house, but there's still that, general, intense interaction. And then the United States chart, instead of being in the Lugna, it's in the eighth house of deep psychology, as well as other people's money, investments, funding. So that was interesting. So with each of these charts, what will we see, when Saturn shifts February 2028, because that's going to be important, it's going to shift into a debilitation sign. So for San Francisco, actually San Francisco is going to begin its Sati. The Saturn's going to be in the house before Moon. So there's going to be a loss of support system. So that's going to be a major thing for, San Francisco, plus Saturn's going to be its debilitation sign in the Lugna. I mean, that's going to be pretty. There's going to be some massive changes heading San Francisco's way once Saturn shifts February 2028. There's going to be an overall restructuring for San Francisco. So then San Jose, when Saturn shifts, Saturn's going to be debilitated in the second house. It's going to be in all of money houses. So there's going to be a financial turndown, looks like. Also, it's going to be on 2, 4, and 11. So there can be end and delays with home, groups, inner circle. There's going to be a lot of financial turnout, but also social restructuring for San Jose. And the United States, well, the United States has Moon in the same position as ChatGPT. You have Moon in the fourth house here. So actually, the United States will end its sati sati. So basically, for the last 7.5 years, once February 2028 rolls around, the United States will go through its, finish its sati sati, which is a difficult period, which always indicates like a loss of support system. But then Saturn's going to be debilitated in a negative house, aspecting the other negative houses. So there's still going to be a lot of stuff going down that's not positive or happy, but it won't be a sati sati. And, again, the sati sati for the United States, yeah, we've probably lost a lot of support around the world, for various reasons. So yeah, so this is pretty mind blowing here. Again, I just kind of threw it in, I thought, but it seems like it's really important that, again, the fields, all three fields that I think primarily affect, again, ChatGPT as a symbol of the whole AI industry, um, are going to be challenging. So the fields, again, it's like you need all of it, right? It's like you need the right time of year to plant, you need the right seed, you need the right soil. So again, it looks like the soil is not going to be, so supportive or productive. But again, um, again, maybe ChatGPT will start running their Jupiter dasha. At least Saturn will get off of the second house and the 11th house once February 2028 rolls around. Again, there will be other problems, but maybe the money will be better, or at least. So yeah. So again, I don't know. I mean, again, it might be a bubble, but I think it might be more about what are people really expecting and hoping, and what are their timelines and all that kind of stuff. But there's definitely more slowness and obstacles than I think was anticipated. And maybe even like a change in direction, in terms of its original intention, because again, it would look like a creative educational project that became much more, directive and, directed towards being disruptive, like with intention, for work. And yeah, so there we go. So I think that's it. Yes, finally there. So thanks if you're here to the bitter end. Thanks for hanging in there with me. As always, I thank you so much for all your support for my work in the channel and all the ways you guys do that. Liking and subscribing and sharing videos, sending in donations, all of it's very much appreciated. Again, all of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are my concepts playlist, where I have over 100 teaching videos, so there's a lot to learn. For more famous birth charts, check out my birth charts archive list 2026, where I list over 180 famous charts I've analyzed on the channel. For individual birth charts and astrology classes, which I offer, email heartlightastro@yahoo.com for more info. And I do have another YouTube channel on natural medicine, health, wellness, and lifestyle, where I talk about Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine, yoga, homeopathy, naturopathic medicine. The name of that channel is Nature Source Care, so that's out there too for you. All right, so as always, I hope you found this talk helpful, useful, and interesting to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. All right, so until the next one, take good care. Namaste.